things matter more at Monaco than anything else as far as victory in the race is concerned. One is getting pole position for the start for the reason that I have explained, and the other is taking advantage of that pole position and getting into the first corner, Saint-Devote first, and getting up the hill with a clear track in front of you while everybody jostles behind you to try establish positions. Jean Alesi there had a puncture this morning in the wet weather section of the extra warm-up, but he's in pretty good shape. He's starting third on the grid. Damon Hill there is second, but Michael Schumacher and the Ferrari have been improving and improving and improving race by race until they took pole position at the San Marino Grand Prix, finished second behind Damon Hill, then followed that up with pole position here yesterday with an absolutely scintillating lap, just the kind you would expect from the double world champion. Schumacher then starts in pole position ahead of Damon Hill.
And we just saw then that, see those little blobs of black on the lower part of the visor aperture? That is to stop the visor coming right the way down and sealing the helmet. In fact, in the wet, the big problem is misting up, and David Coulthard was having major problems with that, and those bits of rubber stop the visor closing and allow a little bit of airflow past the visor to keep it hopefully clean.
Barrichello then in sixth position in his Jordan. Eddie Irvine well up in the Ferrari because he's had very little practice, seventh. Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the top 10, that's good for him. Mika Salo's had a pretty dreary time in qualifying in the Tyrrell, as has his teammate Ukyo Katayama. Johnny Herbert most unhappy in the Sauber 2. They're having trouble in getting the car right. Martin Brundle down at 16th, and he has finished second at Monaco. He loves this circuit, and he was fastest in all three sectors in qualifying, and is absolutely mystified why he's down in 16th position on the grid. But those are the facts. Montermini, I just told you, is not on the grid at the present moment. Now, he may well be starting from the pit lane. I haven't had news of that, and I can't see the end of the pit lane from where I am. So an enormous crowd here. They've been here, I can tell you from having heard them most of the night, that they've been on the hillside below the Royal Palace at Monaco, chanting, blowing their horns, cheering and shouting. There is an enormous Ferrari contingent here because we're only a few miles away from Italy. And after the way Schumacher drove at the home Grand Prix at Imola 2 weeks ago, and then seeing him in pole position here, they consent, and probably with some justification, the possibility of a Ferrari victory here. Now, the last time a Ferrari won at Monaco was when the great Gilles Villeneuve won in the Ferrari V12. His son is driving here today. Not done at all well. He's only starting 10th on the grid. And the reason, quite simply, is that this is an extremely difficult track to learn, even for somebody of Jacques Villeneuve's ability, and he has not mastered the circuit. Starts in 10th position, but since starting in the top 10 is something to be proud of in any Grand Prix, he's got nothing to be ashamed about, and we're going to watch, undoubtedly, some real excitement while he tries to fight his way up through the field to join his teammate there, Damon Hill. And I say again, without any embarrassment, that the most exciting moments of this Grand Prix are almost certainly going to be after the lights have gone out to start the race and the cars have arrived at Saint-Devote. Keep your fingers crossed. Last year we had a coming together between David Coulthard in the Williams and the two Ferrari drivers, who were then Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi, both of whom are in the Benetton team this year. Alesi is third on the grid, Berger is fourth on the grid, because the Benettons have improved considerably here at Monaco, and in front of them they've just got Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher.
Yes, although it is Jacques Villeneuve's first time here at Monaco, we shouldn't forget that it was David Coulthard's first time here last year, and he qualified in third position. So I really don't think that either Villeneuve or the Williams team are particularly pleased with that 10th position. But of course the start is all important, and we know from the recent form that there is no better starter than David Coulthard. He's in 5th place on the grid with the McLaren. Away they go. This is the formation lap, as it's called. All cars on wet weather tyres. There's no question of anybody starting on slicks. and this is the funneling down into Saint-Devote. This is where we must watch off the line when all of these cars will be scrabbling for grip, and they're going to have the added complication of poor visibility and lack of grip. They go through Saint-Devote up this hill. This is almost flat out. It is flat out in the dry, almost flat out in the wet at 160 miles an hour. Threading your way up, down on the brakes to the left that we see coming into the picture. That's Massenet. The right is Casino. These are about 80, 90, 100 miles an hour bends. It getting faster all the way through. Sliding typically coming out of Casino, the right-hander. You'll see the cars jink to their right, our left as they come out of there. That's to avoid a particularly difficult bump that will have the car bottoming, and that's one thing you don't want when you're in the wet. This is the slowest corner of the track. Lowe's corner, and on the first lap again, expect to see the cars virtually stop. Indeed, some cars will be stationary. You get huge traffic jams there. After the Lowe's, there's the two right-handers coming down to Portier, going out of our picture. This is the right-hander, a very crucial one that takes you into the tunnel section. Now the tunnel here is dry. Of course, no rain in the tunnel, but that adds another complication because the tyres tend to overheat because without the cooling effects of the water, these wet tyres overheat quite quickly. Then through the chicane, braking right down to first gear. Schumacher being careful to let everybody queue up behind him. I must say, I'd put my money on Schumacher on this one. I'd love to see Damon Hill win, but the progressive improvement of the Schumacher-Ferrari combination has been highly impressive. Then they come out of this corner, that's only about 30 miles an hour in the dry. It'll be about 25 miles an hour as the minimum speed in the wet. They accelerate up to about 140 miles an hour before jabbing the brakes, coming down from what will be fifth down to third for Tabac. That's out of our picture. It's already been. This is the swimming pool section, kinking left then right, and that was where we saw Hakkinen touch the barrier. That's about 100 miles an hour, and then through the second gear left right. This is virtually round to the end. Rascasse, a lot of spins here in practice, right down to first gear. This is so Mickey Mouse, but it's an amazing challenge as well for the drivers. Up to second gear, jink through the final kink before they come to the start finish line, and again everyone needing to take their grid. Damon Hill there second, Michael Schumacher on the right hand side on the pole.
There he is, bottom left corner of your screen, and remember that the drivers have only been out on this wet track in familiarisation circumstances, not in a standing start situation with all the pressure of getting away first into Saint-Devote. So fingers crossed. The last thing that we want is a pile up at that first corner because it delays the race when they have to start all over again. We'll soon know the answer. 75 laps of the Monaco Grand Prix coming up when the last red light goes out. That's it. Schumacher's away well. Damon Hill is closing up. Alesi and Berger in the two Benettons. Now, what's happening further forward at Saint-Devote? It's the Williams leading. Damon Hill has got ahead of Michael Schumacher as they lead, and this is absolutely crucial. A fantastic start. We didn't see it properly, but already the arrows is out, and that is Jos Verstappen. He only had one nose cone, and he's done that in already. But Damon Hill has done a fantastic job to get ahead of Michael Schumacher, because the man who leads on the first lap is in a commanding position. And now Schumacher's going to have to push to try and get past the Williams out of Lowe's. It's a Benetton third, a Benetton fourth. Now that is a Minardi, and it looks to me like Fisichella's car. It is Giancarlo Fisichella, so two cars out. We're down to 20 cars, and that's Schumacher! Michael Schumacher is out of the Monaco Grand Prix before the first lap has even been completed, and that is going to transform Damon Hill's World Championship prospects, no doubt about that. Here it is. Now let's see what happens. He comes down to the Portier, loses control and goes into the Armco, and up into second and third position go the Benettons.
Well, simply a driving mistake there from Michael Schumacher through the right-hander. The back came round, he put on the opposite lock, but by the time the drift was corrected, which he he was doing. He was too far to one side. He had nowhere to go into the barrier, and of course the left front wheel off. That just shows you how slippery it is. It caught Hakkinen out off the line. Hakkinen out on the first wet practice we had just now, but Damon Hill really got it absolutely right. And interestingly, Schumacher has not made good starts this year. He has never improved from his grid position. And that, sir, looks like Martin Brundle. And no, it's Rubens Barrichello. There's Brundle. That's the Jordan out. On the first lap now, we've got Schumacher out from pole position, having gone off. We've got Barrichello out. He was on 6th on the grid. This is how treacherous these conditions are. 700 horsepower around narrow, tight, slippery, oily streets in the wet.
Yes, but look at Damon Hill. He's 4 seconds ahead now of the first Benetton, and it is Jean Alesi's out of Casino Square. Hill must be feeling he can't believe his luck, because the race now is for him to command from the front without the pressure of the world champion Michael Schumacher. And look at the way Eddie Irvine is going. He's come up from down on the grid, 7th position, up into 4th place. He's carrying the honour of Ferrari on his shoulders in 4th position. There's Frentzen behind him, 5th. David Coulthard in the red and white McLaren is 6th. Jacques Villeneuve is up into 7th position from 10th on the grid. But remember, there are 4 retirements already, and the most important one of them all is world champion Michael Schumacher. Ferrari out of the Monaco Grand Prix, and any hope he had of winning this supreme race for Ferrari.
That looks like Eddie Irvine went wide in the picture there. He's coming through the chicane. We're looking at Berger there following Alesi. But yes, he did. Look, there's Frentzen having a go at Irvine. He got very wide. Frenssen's made a storming start. He was 9th on the grid, coming right up to 5th so far. And indeed, Irvine was 7th on the grid, so he's made good progress. But sadly, on this occasion, David Coulthard is one that slipped back from 5th back to 6th. But what a mistake. There it is. That's what we didn't quite see. Now we do. Irvine, well, he very nearly gets hit by Frentzen up the back. Look at those wings on the Sauber. It looks okay. Alesi, Berger. Now, these conditions are tailor-made for Jean Alesi. A drying track, or certainly, I think it is a little bit drying out there. This is historically when Alesi has really been in his element, his car control really coming to the fore. And the Benetton team have gone better here. Of that, there is no doubt. But Frentzen again having a look all around Eddie Irvine.
And Heinz-Harald Frentzen is famous for not only being the countryman of Michael Schumacher, but in the opinion of many people, as good as the world champion, but he's never had the car to prove it. Damon Hill, on the other hand, is now 6 seconds ahead of Alesi, and it looks, if he continues to go as he is going now, as though he's going to be able to pace himself very carefully and deliberately. But before we go any further, keep a very careful eye on the track surface and the track dryness, and when you look at the sky, see how that is, because it's quite possible that this track is going to start drying out. It's not actually raining at the moment as I talk to you, and if it does start drying out, they're going to be coming in to get rid of those rain tires and switch to slicks, and that could transform the tenor and the race itself. Alesi into the chicane, left, right. That is where Irvine lost it on the previous lap. Now out of the chicane, that's come out of the tunnel at 160 miles an hour. There is Gerhard Berger behind him as they go into the Tabak, the left-hander, at about 85 miles an hour. This is the section that leads up to the swimming pool, and then on to the Rascasse, the right-handed hairpin, about 30 miles an hour, where a lot of people have been going off, including Michael Schumacher in the practice. We ride with Jean Alesi, second to Damon Hill. There is Berger behind him. So it's a Williams leading, a Benetton second, a Benetton third, and Renault engines first, second and third, in a situation where there has been a lot of concern here about the fact that the Renault engine does not seem to have the power dominance that it has had in the past. Mercedes have caught up, Ferrari have caught up, Peugeot have caught up, and who is that off? It looks like a Tyrrell, but I just can't identify. It is a Tyrrell, Ukyo Katayama, and he was in 13th place. So Hakkinen and Carlo, Johnny Herbert, Mick, and towards us now went Martin Brundle, and we join Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari in 4th place, 18 seconds behind race leader Damon Hill. And you can see Heinz-Harald Frentzen swarming about all over the Ferrari's gearbox. And behind Frentzen is David Coulthard.
Now this bit is where, coming into the right-hander, was where Schumacher went off. He went straight on there after the back of the car came round. And that was a very, very major mistake from Schumacher. He has actually made one or two in the sessions in the weekend so far. He had an off on Saturday morning at Saint-Devote when he braked too late and nosed it into the barriers. Clearly Schumacher is pushing extremely hard.
Well, now listen, because these are the people who are out already. Montermini did not start. Katayama is out. Barrichello is out. Fisichella is out. Lamy is out. Verstappen is out. And, of course, Michael Schumacher is out. And we're riding now with David Coulthard. In front of us is Frentzen in the Sauber.
Well, that was a huge moment that we saw from Frentzen there coming into the back. He was right up behind Eddie Irvine. Irvine is holding up a traffic jam of cars. This is Coulthard. Ahead of Coulthard is Frentzen. Irvine at the front of that queue. And Frentzen did very well to hold that Sauber there with the V10 Ford engine. There's Villeneuve, Sarlo, and then Johnny Herbert behind that. And Frenzen's going to have to work hard. He's got a better chance of finding a way past the Ferrari in the wet because braking distances will be longer. Maybe we're about to see an attempt into Saint-Devote, but the margin for error is, as we've seen, so tiny. And it's my guess that his best attempt may come into Mirabeau. We go up through here. This is Saint-Devote. Into the left-hander at the top of here is Massenet. Then we come into the right of Casino. Look, a little flick of opposite lock, and that's Rosset in the other arrows footwork. That's him out. What a miserable weekend it's been for footwork there. Now, if we come back, let's hope. There's Rosset reversing in. This is into the entry to the Rascasse section. That was where Barrichello went off, and you may wonder why he's not there now. The cranes plucked the cars out so quickly. That was where, no, Frentzen has not managed to get by Irvine, but that was the most likely place into Mirabeau.
21 started, 8 retirements already, and Arrows will not be at all happy, the TWR team, because Ricardo Rosset's accident was a carbon copy of that of his teammate Jos Verstappen during qualifying, and they've been going through tail sections and nose cones like there's no tomorrow, to the extent that, as I said earlier on, they only had 2 left to start the race, and now it's of academic interest. Gerhard Berger closing a little on Jean Alesi. The gap between them on the previous lap was 1.35 seconds, and Frentzen having another go at Eddie Irvine, who knows that he's only got to make his Ferrari a tiny bit wider across the track than it would normally be to make it impossible for Frentzen to get by. And in front of us was Frentzen, because we were with David Coulthard there, who drove such a superb race for Williams last year. There he is, and that is a newer MP411B McLaren, because the B means it's a short wheelbase version. It's been changed after Imola, and again Frentzen has a look at Saint-Devote, followed by Coulthard, followed by Villeneuve, followed by Sarlo, who is in 8th position. In 9th place is Johnny Herbert, and we're on lap 6 in this 78 laps the race, watching from Coulthard's McLaren as Villeneuve, Sarlo and the rest go into Casino Square, turn right, drop down towards the Mirabeau. Now
Frentzen, is he close enough? I don't think he is close enough to have a go into the Mirabeau right-hander. This is the one at the bottom here. But meanwhile, Damon Hill is 13.5 seconds out in front now after just 4 laps. Hill in an absolute class of his own. Schumacher throughout the weekend has been the only other driver to really threaten him, and threaten him he very much has done. But that threat is, of course, have gone with Schumacher into the Armco, and Damon just needs to keep it smooth, keep his concentration, and he really should have this race in the bag. And it is helping him a great deal as well, the fact that he's lapping 2 seconds faster than the Benetton pair behind him. That's the man, Damon Hill.
Yeah, let me just remind you that his great father, Graham Hill, won Monaco more than anybody else in the history of the race except Ayrton Senna. Graham won it 5 times, Ayrton Senna won it 6 times, and if there's one thing that Damon wants to do in his career, it's to make his Grand Prix win here his 18th, because it would be his first victory at Monaco, and to continue the Hill family tradition. He's driving absolutely magnificently, of course. he made his day when he got ahead of Michael Schumacher at the start, put so much pressure on the German that he lost it at the right-hander on the way to the Portier after Lowe's hairpin deranged the left front of the Ferrari. And now we're back again with Eddie Irvine in fourth position, and big in his mirrors he can see Frentzen. Now coming to, and here's another spinner, it's Pedro Diniz. Pedro Diniz he's out of the race because he's being pushed, and that's 9 retirements. That is Ricardo Rosset walking in. So 9 out, and we're only on lap 7, not even 1/11th distance yet. And we've got that many retirements. I wonder how many are going to finish the race. You can see there's a good dry line in the tunnel, unsurprisingly you would say, because it's got a roof. But don't forget that the heavy wet weather tyres carry a lot of water in at the entrance of the tunnel. So Irvine, and that is Pedro Diniz's Ligier being lifted off the track. They have heavy duty cranes all round the circuit to pluck the cars out of danger's way, because there is so much Armco here that the last thing you need is another obstruction.
And we can see there that actually Alesi has now found some more pace. He's closed up in terms of lap time by 1.5 seconds to be just half a second away from the best time set from Damon Hill. But of course Hill doesn't need to push desperately hard. The waved yellow flags there, that's the Ligier Diniz. Irvine there, just look at that queue of cars. It is a real traffic jam, and it may well be like that for the next 10, 20 laps. However, what will tend to happen is that somebody sooner or later is going to run out of patience, and as the drivers do more and more laps, little potential opportunities that are not really on in their minds become greater and greater and greater as the laps go on, and sooner or later someone's going to think I can do it and have a lunge, and the chances are they won't be able to, and they're going to end up tangling with the car in front or even going into the Armco barrier. But you can see how very close it is now. Hannes there right at the back of that. Now he's potentially could be the first one to gain if he's got any sense by going into the pits for slick tyres early. He's being held up in a major way by the cars ahead of him, and if he comes out on slick tyres with a little bit slower, he's probably going to be no worse off. But he may as well use his position at the back of that queue to get into the pits, get slick tyres on, and see what lap times can be done like that. And that's going to be a crucial question that everyone's going to want to know. When is the right time to move off these wet tyres onto slicks? I don't think it's yet.
Well, there's only about 4 seconds covering 4th to 9th, and you can see why as they come down to the Mirabeau, headed by the Ferrari of Eddie Irvine, and the rest of them nose to tail. Irvine, Frentzen, Coulthard, then it's Villeneuve, behind him is Sarlo, behind him is Johnny Herbert, in the red and white car is Mika Hakkinen, then in 11th place it's Olivier Panis in the blue Ligier, and there was another general belief, and that was that the Ligier team would collapse when Tom Walkinshaw left, and Michael Schumacher walking in, hardly and understandably looking full of the joy of spring, because he hoped for so much more from his drive at Monaco. But meantime, Eddie Irvine slipping and sliding, pressured all the way by Frentzen, Coulthard, Villeneuve, Sarlo, Herbert, Hakkinen, Panis, and that is Martin Brundle in the new gold liveried Jordan Peugeot. Looking good, looks marvellous in the sunshine, and Eddie Irvine is keeping him back, and you can see now that Frentzen is ducking and diving all over the place, trying to get past Irvine, and at the same time keeping a wary eye on his mirrors at David Coulthard. Now we're on lap 9, or at least Damon Hill, Alesi and Berger are, and Damon Hill is now 15 seconds, so he's pulling out something like 1.5 seconds a lap over the competition. There he is coming down, and I do believe I started to see a bit of a dry patch emerging where Michael Schumacher went off. We'll have a look next time.
Yes, Hill is not actually pulling out too much more from Alesi now, but he doesn't need to. If he maintains that gap, that's fine. But I suspect in reality he will continue to, because the Hill-Williams combination is faster than that of Alesi and Benetton. But strategy is something we haven't spoken about so far, and it's my guess that we're going to see each of these cars stopping once in the race. I don't think anyone's going to go for 2 stops. That was a potential option had it been dry, but again, I think in the wake of what happened last year when Schumacher won with just 1 stop, people would be nervous about making 2 in case a car ahead of them, like for example Irvine, if it had been a situation in which Frentzen was going to make 2 and Irvine was going to make 1, Frentzen was not able to make use of that extra speed because he'd be held up by the slower cars carrying half a tank of fuel. But now here's a twist. With the slower lap times that we get in wet conditions and the fact that this is a shorter race, it's not 200 miles like most Grand Prix, it's 160, and the fact that teams have a little bit larger fuel tanks, fuel consumption's better, there are some cars here, I believe, that in the wet could do the full length of this Grand Prix without stopping at all. We just saw one, the Jordan cars, that's Martin Brundle. It's not impossible. Gary Anderson was telling me that if the lap times don't go faster than 1 minute 40, and we're on 1 minute 48 now, the fuel consumption should be enough to get to the end of the race without stopping at all. Now, Williams' team, I suspect, have got the same possibility, and it may well be that we can see cars go to the end without stopping at all if it continues in the wet weather conditions. But the most likely thing is that it's going to dry out, and they're going to have to come in for slick tyres, and they will probably put on a bit of fuel while they're doing it, but not a great deal. So if we do see any pit stops for tyres, I think we should expect them to be very fast, like 6-7 seconds fast, maybe 8 seconds maximum, because not too much fuel will need to go in.
And I really do think it's going to be when rather than if things go on as the way they are, because the circuit is definitely starting to dry out and things are going to become very, very different indeed. Eddie Irvine there, the man from Conleague in County Down. He's doing a great job. This is only his 6th Grand Prix for Ferrari. And as I said earlier on, Michael Schumacher, as he did with Benetton, has been having the lion's share of testing for Ferrari. And because of that, as Frentzen has a look and fails to get alongside Irvine's car, because of that, Eddie Irvine has only had 1 testing session, and he said yesterday the brutal truth is he just doesn't feel happy with the car. A lot of people in the media were getting at him and saying, you've had no testing, you are not doing well, what are you going to do about it? And Eddie, in a very matter-of-fact way, said, well, what am I supposed to do? After Imola, we only had 1 gearbox, and Michael wanted to test, and he gets priority. Am I supposed to go out and buy a gearbox and put it on the back of the car and say I'll drive that one? Until he gets a car to test, Irvine is not going to be totally at home with the Ferrari, but in spite of that, he's staying ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen as you watch Gerhard Berger in 3rd place and going into the pits now. Is this going to be a first early and courageous tyre stop? Let's see what happens. And as the fuel goes in, but no tyres.
Berger's been losing pace actually compared to Alesi. He's been dropping back by 2 seconds a lap from Alesi over the past 4 laps. So Berger clearly has a problem. He's in, they're trying to sort it out. He's going out again, same tyres on the car. Stalled it now. We've seen this time and time again from Benetton. They have apparently a very aggressive clutch, or there's some reason why they stalled it a great deal. Maybe he's got an engine problem. A lot of consternation going on here. It's so difficult for everyone, the driver and the engineers, to think super clearly in these situations when the seconds are ticking away and the seconds are crucial. So we thought that may have been a tyre stop. It was not. Clearly wets are still the way to go at the moment. The computer comes out, that's going to be plugged in, and they'll probably be able to work out exactly what the problem is by looking at the information from that. But Berger's race is over. Indeed, he's getting out of the car.
And that makes 10 retirements on lap 11. I wonder how many are going to be left, and it means that Eddie Irvine is now in a position of getting on the podium because he's in 3rd place, and the battle that you can see heading into the tunnel on the 11th lap out of 78. And I start to worry about how many cars we're going to have left to talk about at the end of the race, but the positions are Damon Hill on lap 11 leading by 16 seconds from Jean Alesi. Gerhard Berger into the pits and out of the race, and up into 3rd position the red Ferrari. 4th is Frentzen, 5th is Coulthard, 6th now is Villeneuve, he's in the points, 7th is Salo, 8th is Herbert, 9th is Hakkinen, 10th is Parnis, and in 11th place right behind Parnis's Ligier is Martin Brundle in the Jordan. Up to the swimming pool. And Frentzen is just being patient, and that is an older looking Gerhard Berger. He's starting to lose his hair, and it's showing. He's looking a lot older these days than he has done, and he's 36 years old now. And that's the end of his Monaco Grand Prix, having already had 2 retirements this year in Brazil and Argentina. And Irvine round Saint-Devote with, big in his mirrors still, the yellow-nosed Sauber, then the McLaren of Coulthard, then the Williams of Villeneuve, then the Tyrrell of Salo, the Sauber of Herbert, the McLaren of Hakkinen, the Ligier of Parnis, and the Jordan of Brunkel.
Damon Hill may have this 17-second lead, but he's not reducing the pressure. 1 minute 48.1, a new fastest lap of the race so far. But back to Eddie Irvine, talking about his gearbox and lack of them. Interesting that Eddie Irvine is the man, the Ferrari driver, that's using the full 1996 specification car. Schumacher again went back to using the 1995 rear end, and by that we mean gearbox, rear suspension, and the underfloor, the all-important underfloor that generates part of the downforce. And he did that after running on the Thursday practice session. He used it for the Saturday qualifying session to put it on pole. And here, although one may well be surprised that why does someone like Schumacher go back to an older specification rear end, I think that's come, as happened in Brazil, as happened in Argentina, in the quest for extra reliability. The 1996 car is still not super reliable. We should bear that in mind watching Eddie Irvine there. And on a circuit like this, the vast majority of the downforce comes from the wings. The cars are covered in wings. We saw that at the start to get maximum downforce. The ultimate aerodynamic efficiency is not so important. And so really Irvine was not going to have a lot of deficit really over Schumacher, and clearly Schumacher going well.
What's happened to Gerhard Berger? Tony Jardine can tell us, he's with him.
Gerhard, what happened?
A gearbox problem.
What were the track conditions like before that happened?
Okay. It was okay.
A great pity for you because you were running third.
It was a bit slippery, but it was good. I could go a little bit quicker, but Chan was in front, so I didn't want to take any risk. And it was fine, everything was under control.
Hard luck, thank you.
Lap 13, Damon Hill leads, there he is, and already 10 retirements out of the 22 who were to start. Montermini did not start. Schumacher goes out, then Verstappen, then Lamy, then Fisichella, then Barrichello, then Katayama, then Ricardo Rosset, then Pedro Diniz, and now Gerhard Berger. And that means to say that there are 12 cars left on the 13th lap out of 22 who went round the familiarisation laps this morning in the wet. And it's a long, long haul yet, and Damon Hill's got to just keep it cool, place the car properly, watch the competition. He'll be coming up to lap people before very much longer, and that's always a tense time. And Jean Alesi exits the Rascasse as Eddie Irvine third, Heinz-Harald Frentzen fourth, continuing to show him the nose of the Sauber, exit the swimming pool and on to the Rascasse.
Look how ragged Eddie Irvine's getting. The back of that Ferrari twitching out, and every twitch gives an opportunity for Frentzen to get closer. Normally he'd be able to get by, but again the narrowness of the streets here means that it's virtually impossible to do so. And David Coulthard looks on behind. But again, Frentzen can do nothing and just keep watching carefully and just hoping from his point of view that Eddie Irvine makes a mistake big enough that gives him a chance to get by. He wipes his visor, and at this stage the visors of all the drivers will be getting pretty mucky. They've got these rip-offs in front of them, but even so, the wet tends to pick up the dirt on the ground, and that washes over the visor and makes visibility really pretty tricky. So following, as Frentzen is not easy at all.
In the last 10 years, only 3 drivers have won the Monaco Grand Prix. The great Ayrton Senna, the great Alain Prost, and now we can say the great Michael Schumacher. Senna 6 times, and Alain Prost 4 times, and now Damon Hill may be joining that assembly. I say may, I'm being very cautious indeed. There's still an awful long way to go, and even though he has an 18.5 second lead, things can go wrong with the car. You can get into trouble when you catch people to try to get past them. But on the 14th lap, Hill leads Alesi by 18.5 seconds, and he's lapping all the time faster than the Frenchman in the Benetton Renault. You see the battle for third between Irvine and Frentzen, followed by David Coulthard. Then there's that gap before Villeneuve, Sarlo and Herbert go through, followed by Häkkinen in the spare McLaren, Parnis and Martin Brundle, and that just leaves Luca Badoer, who is a long way back indeed. He's 1 minute and 38 seconds behind Damon Hill, and Hill is lapping in 1 minute 49 at the moment. So in just a few laps, Damon is going to be faced with the challenge of getting past the first man he's going to lap. It will be Badoer in the new 40 Ford, which is better than the old one, but still not nearly good enough. Like Eddie Irvine, Badoer and Montermini have not had enough testing in the new 40.
The actual psychology of having a driver like Frentzen bearing down on you if you're Eddie Irvine is quite interesting, because to start with, over the first few laps, Irvine sliding once again with that Ferrari. Irvine would have been acutely aware of it and really feel him breathing down his neck. But then you go through a phase of realization that you've kept the guy at bay for perhaps 3, 4, 5, 6 laps, and you think, well, providing I keep doing the same thing and don't make mistakes, I can keep him at bay. And that's exactly, I'm sure, what Eddie Irvine's got in his mind, that he must not make mistakes. What he's got to watch out for now is just losing that little bit of concentration to end up braking a touch too late. That was a chance just there. You see, he ran a little bit wide and braking a little bit too late. The chicane out of the tunnel that they're about to come into is another golden opportunity, but providing Irvine can keep his concentration and, if anything, brake a little bit early, then he should be able to retain that place until the first round of pit stop starts. Irvine really holding up to the pressure extremely well.
Yes, Eddie Irvine, like most of them, has come up the conventional way. He was in Formula 3 and Formula 4 before that. Then he was in Formula 3000, and Frentzen and Coulthard are definitely closing on him now. The gap, incidentally, between Coulthard, who is 5th, and Villeneuve, who is in the points at 6th, is just 2 seconds. David Coulthard, now look at Frentzen. This is where he really pushes, and he's trying to get through on the inside, but Eddie Irvine only has to marginally move the Ferrari across to the left before turning into the right at the Rascasse to block Heinz Harald Frentzen, which he's perfectly entitled to do. He's in front of the Sauber. He can take whatever line on the track he likes, provided he does not blatantly weave to keep the Sauber past, and he's certainly not doing that. And Frentzen is getting an increasing problem now from David Coulthard. Indeed, between those three, there is just over 1 second. Irvine, Frentzen, Coulthard.
Indeed, David Coulthard there must be having a greatly entertaining grandstand view as he watches Frentzen do whatever he can to try and find a way past Irvine, who clearly was in some trouble on that corner, probably because he simply got on the brakes a little bit too late and had to grapple to get the car back together. It comes back to this point, if anything, of braking a touch early. But I think Frentzen he's starting to rattle, and Hill goes by. That is Badoer, the first of the 40 cars. What I think is interesting is that last year, from pole position to the back end of the grid was a 9-second spread. This year, we've got the 107% qualifying rule, and that's meant that the back end teams have had to sharpen up their act, spend more time going out there to make sure that they could do a competitive time. As a result, the front of the grid to the back of the grid is just 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and so it's taken 16 laps rather than perhaps last year 9 or 10 before the leader, in this case, comes up to lap the first of the back markers.
Yeah, and we have an extra problem on the track. There it is. It's Luca Badoer in the mobile chicane, the 40 Ford. Hill has got past him. Alesi will get past him because Alesi's on the track by himself. But Irvine, Frentzen and Coulthard are together, and if Badoer is incorrectly placed, one or other could fail to get past and have the man behind him surge through and take a place. It's going to be interesting and exciting to see what happens. Hill on lap 17. Now there's the battle I'm talking about. Irvine 3rd, Frentzen 4th in the Sauber, Coulthard 5th in the McLaren, and less than a second covers them now up to Saint-Devote. Meantime, Jean Alesi is getting closer and closer to Luca Badoer, 12th and last in the Monaco Grand Prix of 1996. Terrific scrap for 3rd, 4th, 5th, and for that matter, behind them, between Sarlo and Herbert, because Mika Salo, who is in 7th place in the Tyrrell Yamaha and richly deserving to get into the points after having had awful luck this season, is just 1 place off 6th position, which gives 1 World Championship point. And I would be very surprised if at least one of the cars in front of Salo, who is 7th, doesn't drop out before the end of this race. Irvine, Frentzen.
Interesting to see. Behind Frentzen, David Coulthard is not wearing his normal helmet by the look of it to me. We haven't had a close-up view, but I know that between the wet practice session that was held an hour before the race got on, or an hour and a half before the race got underway, that David was having problems with misting up and he was trying some different helmets, and just maybe that's what's happened then. He's found one that he felt would be better in the wet conditions, and that's why it doesn't have his regular Scottish cross on it.
Good point. There's Villeneuve and Salo and Herbert and Parnis. Parnis in the blue Ligier, 9th position, and Frentzen nearly loses it. He's trying so hard.
And Eddie Irvine is so slow at this particular part of the circuit too. But the problem is there is just nowhere for Frentzen to get by Irvine. Now this is exactly what we saw a few years ago when Ayrton Senna won the Grand Prix here. And there is Frentzen. Look at the way he's sliding that Sauber around, putting down the power. Nigel Mansell came out of the pits with new tyres on his Williams. Senna was running his old set throughout, and there was nothing that Mansell could do, and Senna went, oh, and does, very tight indeed. And Sauber, he's broken the front wing. I fear that Frentzen's broken. He has indeed. This is just what we were saying. The temptation to try something has just been too much.
And Coulthard goes past Heinz-Harald Frentzen up into 4th place. A perfect example of the fact that the wrong move in the wrong place at Monaco can have very severe conclusions. Heinz, now here's a replay. Let's look and see what happened.
Well, we just saw that's coming up the hill, but what we'd like to see is what happened before that, going into Saint-Devote. That's what I'd like to see did Frentzen nudge Irvine up the back, or was he squeezed across by Irvine coming across? But either way, that's going to be a new nose for Frentzen, and it's going to put him well back. He will probably stay out. Here's Coulthard, replay coming by Frentzen, going up the hill. Your Frentzen's front wing already hanging in the ground. There should be no further damage from that, but this will be about a 1.5 minute pit stop, I suspect, from the Sauber team replacing that nose.
And if you're thinking, well, if you'd like to see it, so would I, why can't we see it? I have to tell you that we don't have any contact with the bloke who makes the decisions, so we're in his hands. Off goes a tear-off strip from Eddie Irvine's helmet to clear his vision, and Salo and Herbert and Parnis are closing up. There is Hakkinen, and Hakkinen has got Brundle behind him, and there is the Sauber of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who's dropped right down to 11th position, and the wing is fouling the front tyre, and he will have to come in, absolutely no doubt at all about it. We're watching the Sauber, or will be in a few moments, and you'll see it peel off into the pit lane for him to get a new front nose.
But let's also keep a careful eye on the Sauber. Will they put on a set of slick tyres at the same time? The track is clearly drying, the times are getting faster, and I wonder if they've actually bogged down. They're not getting as much faster as I would expect. Now either that's because the track is remaining slippery, or it's because they've just reached the limit of the wet tyres on a track. Look, there they are, they're doing the nose. Yes, the tyres are coming off. Now, is it slick tyres going nose? Another set of wet. So Frentzen would have radioed in and said that he's going to be, obviously needs the nose, and he would have given them the decision too, to stay on wet tyres.
Lovely. 15 seconds to replace the nose cone. Williams were doing it in testing this morning in 13 seconds. Out onto the track again. New set of tyres and a new nose cone. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is now last by a very long way indeed. Damon Hill was coming up to lap the Sauber, and Lacey is coming up to lap Luca Badoa in the yellow 40. Damon Hill. Now this is an indication of the fact that the track is drying out, because Damon Hill has gone fastest for the last 3 laps, and that means that the track is providing more grip. But we're in a commentary box. Perhaps Tony Jardine could tell us what it's like outside.
I can indeed, Murray. I'm in a privileged position because I'm right at behind the Benetton signalling area, and I've got a great view of the Anthony No corner, and it is drying out, it is getting a bit warmer, and the cars are desperately sliding because the line is very, very dry indeed. And beyond that, I look at the huge bank leading up to the palace. The Ferrari supporters are
as Alesi, having lapped the yellow 40 of Luca Badoer, drops back because he took a little while to get past there, and he's now 21 seconds behind the dominant and fastest on the track, Damon Hill, whose fastest lap was on lap 19, and he's now on his 20th lap, and that lap was done in 1 minute 45.8 compared with Michael Schumacher's lap record of 1 minute 21.5, so about 24 seconds a lap slower, and that's from the quickest man on the track. There he is, Damon Hill. When will he be coming in to switch from wets to slicks? He's got a considerable cushion and can play it tactically as he wishes. Now I would expect Heinz-Harald Frentzen to start going extremely quickly. In fact, on the previous lap he was ahead of Luca Badoer, so he's not quite last. Alesi into the Rascasse. This is lap 20 for Alesi. Damon Hill, of course, has already completed his 20th lap and is on his 21st.
Well, a great shame then that Frentzen succumbed to being sucked in by Irvine. We said it's very, very difficult, it's very frustrating, but as I also said, the drivers tend to believe that the little chinks of opportunity that exist get bigger and bigger until finally they have a go, and that's the result, and of course that's put Frentzen right at the back of that queue. Frentzen is a driver who's overall extremely highly rated. He went very well last year, tipped even to join Williams at the middle of last year for this season, but it of course went to Villeneuve in the end, and Frentzen really hasn't had the opportunity to shine particularly well this year. Johnny Herbert in the end, fellow Sauber, having a good slide there, but this could have been such a race. Sadly though, he's blown it by just being too impatient.
Well, here's something that very few people know. Olivier Panis is the only man to have overtaken another car here today, and he's done it twice. Olivier Panis, the Frenchman, there he is in the Ligier in the background. He is in 8th position, chasing Mika Salo in the Tyrrell, who is 6th, and there is the Finn behind Jacques Villeneuve, dropping down to the Mirabeau behind the McLaren. And so you see that David Coulthard, who was so close to Frentzen and Irvine, is now nearly 2 seconds behind Eddie Irvine's Ferrari, and catching him fast is Jacques Villeneuve, 10th on the grid, his first Monaco Grand Prix. The young Canadian is a man to watch here at Monaco in his first Grand Prix at the Principality.
But look at that, Heinz-Harald Frentzen sets the fastest lap of the race, 44.8. That's 0.4 of a second faster than leader Damon Hill's last lap. So that shows you just how much he was being held up by Eddie Irvine. But of course it also shows you the benefit of having a fresh set of tyres on the car. But generally I think it's a clear track in front of him. But let's see what David Coulthard does. He really should be able to close up to get much closer to Eddie Irvine than he is. He will certainly, I hope, will not make the same mistake that Frentzen did. But either way, he will need to show that he can go faster than he was doing when he was being held up by Frentzen. At the moment it looks like it's Coulthard who's holding up the queue of cars behind him rather than Eddie Irvine.
Yes, and as I've said before, you can only hypothesise what the problem is if indeed there is a problem. And there must be, for Coulthard to have dropped back so much. We don't know, for instance, whether he has got a vision problem if he's wearing a different helmet. We don't know whether he's got a gearbox problem. We don't know whether he's got a brake problem or an engine problem, or whether he's just pacing himself very carefully on what is still a very greasy track. You're looking back at Jacques Villeneuve, who is in 5th position ahead of Salo from Finland. Mika Salo, the great rival of Mika Häkkinen, the other Finnish driver. Salo in the Tyrrell. Häkkinen is in 9th position behind his countryman, looking through the steering wheel of the Williams at Jacques Villeneuve, the pride of Canada, and rightly so, having won the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, which was only his 4th Grand Prix, a superb achievement.
Well, I'm sure Damon Hill's been informed that Frentzen set that new fastest lap. It shouldn't be any great sense of pressure to him because you know that Frentzen is back and is probably charging through. the team may well have mentioned that on the radio. But nevertheless, Hill clearly showing that he's very much in control. 24 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi, who is 36 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine. But this is an interesting point here. Jacques Villeneuve, now he normally wears glasses, but when he's in his Grand Prix car, he actually wears contact lenses, and he changed to contact lenses a couple of years ago after he found that on the bumpier tracks, the glasses literally kept jumping up and down and he couldn't see where he was going.
Lap 23, race order. Damon Hill fastest on the track because he has gone quicker again on his 22nd lap, indicating that the conditions are improving. 1 minute 44.6 is 24 seconds ahead of Alesi. Third is Irvine, who is 37 seconds behind the Benetton. A long, long way. Fourth is Coulthard, there he is. Fifth is Villeneuve. Sixth is Salo, we're riding with Coulthard now. Seventh is Johnny Herbert. Eighth is Parnis. Ninth is Hakkinen. 10th is Brundle. And 11th, and very quick indeed, recovering superbly, Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the new nose Sauber. And in 12th position, a lap adrift already on lap 23, is Luca Badoer in the 40. 12 cars left, and Frentzen goes fastest again. He's only 3.5 seconds behind Martin Brundle, and Brundle is only 2 seconds behind Hakkinen, who is less than a second behind Parnis. So when Frentzen, who's lapping quicker than anybody, including Damon Hill, the race leader, catches Martin Brundle, we're going to see this nose-to-tail snake again, and he's learned his lesson. He'll be very careful about trying to get past Martin Brundle, a very, very experienced racing driver. And coming towards us up the hill, Jean Alesi in the Benetton Renault.
Interesting there that Frentzen is about to get himself up onto the tail. Oh, and that's the new fastest lap. Jean Alesi now putting a little bit more pressure on. He was 24 seconds behind Hill. That takes him to 22.5. And I'd be very interested to know what sort of lap time could be done on slick tyres. One has to assume that those out there know. One of the problems around here is that you can see a little bit of a dry line just there, coming down into lows. That's a dry line, the odd patch here and there. But of course, there is no wind. You can see how still the trees are. There is no way for the water, the vapour, to be dispersed. It's very humid down here. Again, the dampness is still present. And into the tunnel, of course, it dries out. And the tunnel, the reason that the tunnel is not flat, or is virtually only just flat, is because to take it too quickly would actually overheat those wet weather tyres on that dry surface, and that would then screw them up for the balance of the circuit.
Jean Alesi looking very hard for a good result. He was second in the Brazilian Grand Prix and third in Argentina. And although he finished sixth in the San Marino Grand Prix, he's had a lot of criticism for driving into people. He drove into Eddie Irvine in Australia. I was talking to him yesterday, and he said people seem to forget that at the San Marino Grand Prix I had a terrible start because, like my teammate Gerhard Berger, I had my front brake lock on. They have a special brake, a button brake on the steering wheel, which steadies the car on the starting grid and prevents them creeping and incurring a penalty for a jump start. That brake locked on, said Alesi, and I had to really charge to get towards the front. He made a beautiful analogy, actually. He says, I'm like a man walking around with a pack on his back full of glasses, and if I make a wrong move anywhere, one of the glasses breaks. Well, it's not doing it here at Monaco. Jean Alesi fastest again, 1 minute 42.6 compared with the lap record of 1 minute 21.6. Round lows hairpin down to where Michael Schumacher went off. Now underneath the elevated roadway into the Portier, and now into the tunnel under Lowe's Hotel, where the chip pan caught fire in the kitchen before one Grand Prix, as a result of which the fire extinguishers came on, flooded the kitchen, flooded the track, and delayed the start of the Monaco Grand Prix for a very long time. And if that wasn't a unique happening, I'd like to know what was.
Well, I very much hope Alesi doesn't make any mistakes in this race. In last year's Grand Prix, he was running second when he came across Martin Brundle's spinning Ligier and ended up going off the track, and that was the end of his race. And this year, he's had a lot of press criticism because of his wild antics. This year, he hit Eddie Irvine in Melbourne. He then had a rather strange torpedoing solo incident at the Nürburgring and was generally in wild form at the Imola. But at the end of the day, Alesi is exceedingly fast. He's out-qualified his teammate Berger every time, and really looking over his results from the past year or two, he doesn't deserve the reputation of being a wild accident-prone driver, and I very much hope he can use today to demonstrate that fact.
Is this going to be Damon Hill's Monaco Grand Prix win that he's been striving for so much? He won in Australia, he won in Brazil, he won in Argentina, he won at the San Marino Grand Prix, and he was fourth in the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, at which a lot of the media fell on him like ravening wolves and said Hill has blown it, he's returned to his old form. It was a long, long way from being true. He had a bad start, had to fight his way up through the field, and still finished in the points, as he has done in every race this year, having won them all except that one. And he's in pretty good shape at the present moment, because he's almost 1/3 of the way through the Monaco Grand Prix as he comes up to the Sauber in front of him, because he is now on his 26th lap. It's a 78-lap race, and the car in front of him is that of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who was going extremely quickly, and I'm surprised to see Damon bearing down on him so fast. How's he going to cope with Frentzen? Will the German move over? He's in 11th place. Is he going to let Damon Hill through as they go round Saint-Devote? That's about 50 miles an hour on the apex, climbing up to about 150 miles an hour even in these conditions. Turn left at the Massenet, the Sauber in front. You can see it's got its high intensity rear light on. That's a new requirement for this year, the real high intensity. They've had them for a long time, but not as powerful as they are now. Round the Mirabeau, and Hill gets the signal, or will do, when he comes round.
He's also got the signal L1 on his pit bull, which makes me wonder, does that mean one lap before coming in? That certainly, and it looks like it's, we've got the tyres out. This is Damon Hill now. What I think is going to happen is that I think they can get enough fuel into that Williams. Damon Hill is indeed coming in, and he may well get out of the pit ahead of Alesi. That's going to be important, and it's going to be, I think they've had the fuel tank of that Williams pretty full, and it may be that with about, as Frentzen lets Hill go through, with a fuel stop of around about 10-11 seconds, they may have enough fuel now to get to the end of the race, but also, more importantly, a short enough stop to get out ahead of Jean Alesi.
We'll know the answer very shortly. This is a replay of Frentzen courteously moving over and letting Damon Hill through. Mark of a very good driver, because he knew what the score was. He was watching his mirrors and he recognised the Williams Renault, and now this is the Rascasse, and into the pit lane goes Damon Hill. No, he does not. He most certainly does not. So presumably he will be coming round on the next lap. We saw Paul Edwards putting the numbers on the board and the arrow indication. They can and do, of course, talk to the drivers by radio. Frentzen has come in. Now that explains it. I was amazed, frankly, to see Damon Hill catching Frentzen so convincingly when the German had been going faster than the Williams Renault. But Heinz-Harald Frentzen has come into the pit lane just out of my sight, as Hill now on his 28th lap is slower than Jean Alesi. The Frenchman has just done a lap in 1 minute 41.4, which is the fastest lap that we have had so far today, and the gap is 22.2 seconds between race leader Damon Hill, looking good at the moment for a 5th win from 6 races, as on a dry line now virtually. Yes, slick tyres, there's the Williams team, and they're all ready to take the rain tyres off, which will be very hot, tired and worn, and replace them with a nice fresh set of slick Goodyears.
And that, I think, is exactly what Frentzen came into the pits for. I'm sure that he's gone out on slick tyres, so I need to and actually Coulthard just done the fastest lap now, 1 minute 41.0. It's important that we bear these lap times. 1 minute 41 seems to be the lap time of the front runners now, and see just what they do on slick tyres. Will they go quicker? It's my guess that they will do, maybe by 1, 2, even 3 seconds. The times can start tumbling pretty quickly once it is dry enough for slick tyres to work.
Hill in. This is the end of his 28th lap out of 78. Now, I'm watching for Jean Alesi. Keep an eye on Damon Hill. I'll let you know if and when Jean Alesi goes through as the rain tires come off and the slicks go on. Robbie Tars pulls out the fuel filler. Alesi has still not gone through. Damon Hill boils as fast as he can down the pit lane. Remember, there is a speed limit. Frentzen is going through, and now Damon Hill exits, and Jean Alesi has gone through in the lead. There he is. He's only about a second ahead of Damon Hill. There he is in the background. Alesi leads the Monaco Grand Prix on lap 29. But, of course, Damon Hill is now on fresh rubber, which should be more suited to the drying conditions of the Monaco circuit. The fastest lap we've had so far on rain tires was David Coulthard, 1:41.04. Frentzen has just done a 1:40.5, presumably on slicks. Eddie Irvine coming in from third position. Off come the rain tires, on go the slicks. Immaculate teamwork from the Ferrari organisation. Eddie flips the paddle underneath the steering wheel. They're all coming in now. This is Olivier Panis, 8th position in the Ligier Mugen. You can see the fire extinguisher ready there on the left. The long megaphone-looking device. Not needed, thank heavens. Out goes Irvine. Now we're with race leader Jean Alesi, and right behind him is Damon Hill. Second in the Monaco Grand Prix, but with a big advantage. He's pushing Jean Alesi, who may be coming in fact, who should be coming in on this lap, to switch from his rain tyres, because the teams will have got the message now. Sarlo's been in, incidentally. Is this Alesi turning in? No. Alesi stays out. And Frentzen has just gone round in 1:31.7. That is nearly 10 seconds faster than the fastest lap on rain tyres.
Well, that's going to have people kicking themselves, because that just shows that what's gone on here is that no one has been brave enough to come in for their slick tyres early enough. They've been carrying out on wet.
And Damon Hill passes Jean Alesi to retake the lead at the Monaco Grand Prix in commanding style. He's got a wonderful rhythm going now on lap 30, ticking away the laps. Look at the gap between himself and Alesi, and Jean Alesi is no driver to hang back. This is a replay where, with Damon Hill, Alesi drifts wide at Saint-Devote, and Villeneuve comes into the pits from 4th position in the Williams, and they're taking the gurney flap off the wing. Jonathan, what is a gurney flap?
A gurney flap increases the downforce of the car, and in wet conditions you want that extra downforce. Hakkinen comes in for his stop, but in the dry conditions you don't so much. And indeed, what you want also in wet is not just more grip, but you want more grip on the back end, because the back with all the power is more prone to slide. So when you come to dry conditions, then you want to rebalance the car by taking a bit of downforce off that back end, or it would start to what we call understeer in dry conditions, and that means the front plough straight on the corners, and that can be very time consuming at any circuit, particularly here at Monaco.
Now surely Jean Alesi there is going to come in on this lap. We know that they're going something like 10 seconds a lap faster on slick tyres, and yes, Alesi in for Benetton comes into the pit now. He was some 41 seconds ahead of David Coulthard in third position. He's taken on fuel, he's taken on slick tyres. It's still wet in the pit lane. You could see that there's very heavy moisture on the tread of the tyres on Alesi's car. Now he's out of the pit lane now, rejoins the track now. Nobody in sight. Frentzen, meantime, has done another fastest lap in the Sauber, and that'll be some encouragement to the Swiss team with their Ford V10 engine, because they've had an awful lot of problems this year, and neither Johnny Herbert nor Heinz-Harald Frentzen have finished in the points yet. Into the pits comes David Coulthard from third position. So Damon Hill has stopped first, Jean Alesi has stopped second, Eddie Irvine has stopped third, David Coulthard is, I think, now in fourth position. Johnny Herbert will be coming up into the points, into fifth place. But no, as I say that, Olivier Panis is in fourth position, and Coulthard is going up the hill to the Massenet as you watch the Williams of Damon Hill coming through to complete his 31st lap out of 78. And we'll see when Jean Alesi goes through, having lost his second position to Damon Hill, what the gap is between the dominant Williams Renault. I was saying earlier on that there had... And that is Martin Brundle. Martin Brundle out.
And the rear wheel is damaged. Martin Brundle has spun. That's a Casino. We may be having a slow-mo replay. There it is, through the left-hander part of Massenet, bang into the Armco. Left rear wheel damaged, back up into the escape road. Slick tyres, and almost certainly coming out too quick, too soon, I'm afraid, on slick tyres on a damp track. It's always one of the traps to catch out the unwary, and I must admit Martin's going to be kicking himself for that, because a driver of his experience, and he's the oldest driver in Formula One, really should be more aware than anybody of that risk.
Yeah, it's great pity. It's his 148th Grand Prix, Martin, and he's finished second here at Monaco when he was with McLaren. He loves this circuit, usually drives extremely well on it, but that was a momentary lapse, caught out on the transition from rain tyres on drying conditions to slick tyres on drier conditions. And you look at Damon Hill now on his 32nd lap.
Now, if my eyes didn't deceive me, and let's have a look at David Coulthard's helmet at that pit stop, but I think although Michael Schumacher may not be winning this race, or may not be finishing this race, it may be that one of his helmets does, because that looks to me very much like a Michael Schumacher helmet on David Coulthard, and I do believe that they do share a common helmet supplier, so maybe before the race has been a swap around and a panic measure has seen Coulthard taking over one of Michael's helmets.
And look at Herbert, Villeneuve and Sarlo battling for 6th position. Johnny Herbert in the Sauber, in the points. He hasn't finished there this season. He did, of course, for Benetton last year when he won the British Grand Prix and won the Italian Grand Prix, finished 4th in the World Championship, but he's been looking for the right form with Sauber, and that's Frentzen, the last one of those 5 cars. Johnny Herbert then. Villeneuve is behind him in the Williams. Then it is Mika Salo in the Tyrrell. Mika Häkkinen, his rival from Finland, in the McLaren, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Sauber. Nose to tail again at Monaco, lap 33. Parnis is the fastest man on the track, 1 minute 30.4 in the Ligier. He's been driving it beautifully here, but this is a tremendous scrap here for 5th position.
I must say, it was a great shame that Frentzen didn't put on those slicks when he came in for that front wing change, because it was patently obvious from the fact that the lap times dropped down by 10 seconds from 1 minute 41 to 1 minute 31 that all the cars put on slick tyres too late in terms of being what was ideal for the tyres. Now, what I suspect many of them were doing was trying to hang on until they could get far enough into this race that they could put enough fuel in the car to guarantee getting to the very end. But nevertheless, having said that, it doesn't take too many laps at 10 or even 8 or 7 seconds a lap to pull out a real margin, and the man who could have gained most from that was probably Heinz-Harald Frentzen, because he wouldn't have been put back, as he was stopping anyway, into the realms of other people to get held up behind other traffic.
Looking across the nose of Olivier Parnis's Ligier, now he is catching Eddie Irvine. Parnis, 4th position in the Ligier with the Mugen Honda V10 engine, is catching Eddie Irvine. His previous lap was the fastest of the race. You see the disc brake glowing there as he puts the brakes on hard going through the chicane, and his previous lap was 3 seconds faster than that of Eddie Irvine, who is in 3rd position. And Olivier Parnis has only scored 1 World Championship point so far. The Ligier team needs something to lift them after Tom Walkinshaw left and took his team manager with him and a lot of technicians. They've reformed magnificently, and in the warm-up this morning, Olivier Parnis was actually the fastest of the whole lot. Over the line he goes again, and the gap between himself and Eddie Irvine is down to 2.3 seconds. There's the proof. Irvine 3rd, Parnis 4th, and Parnis is lapping distinctly quicker than the Ferrari. He will catch it fairly soon, but as we have seen before in this race, Eddie Irvine does extremely well at keeping people behind him. Lap 34, Damon Hill leads the Monaco Grand Prix from Jean Alesi by 29 seconds. The Frenchman's previous lap was a bit quicker than Damon Hill's, but half a minute lead is very considerable. Third Irvine, fourth Parnish. You see them go through the tunnel at 160 miles an hour, exit it at just over 160 miles an hour, drop down to the chicane. This is it, left and right. Coulthard is fifth, right behind him is Herbert, right behind him is Villeneuve, seventh, right behind him is Sarlo, and Mika Hakkinen is ninth behind the Tyrrell of Mika Sarlo. Eddie Irvine. Swimming pool. Just look at Parnis. He's gobbling up the distance between himself and the V10 Ferrari.
Now, one of the problems that Parnis is going to face, apart from the problem of getting by, which as we know is virtually impossible anyway, is the fact that the dry line is only dry on the line, and that means for Parnis to have a look at any other line, it's going to be wet, and he's not going to have the grip. So I think once again Parnis is going to be relegated to following Eddie Irvine, and we don't think they put any more fuel in that Ferrari. Now, just maybe that Ferrari tank again is big enough to have enough fuel at the start of this race to get to the very end, and that's been why Irvine's pace has been slow in the early stages. We really do not know, and I must say I do not know whether any of these drivers are going to have to stop again. There's a very real possibility that Eddie Irvine might be able to get to the very end of this race without stopping at all, and that those drivers that have stopped, that they again will not need to make a further stop.
Right, well, while you watch Eddie Irvine and Olivier Parnis for battling for third place, excuse me, 1 hour has gone. 34 laps have gone. So that looks to me, since this is a 78 lap race, as though we're going to be a 2-hour race and not a 78 lap race. But whatever, it's going on for that distance, for that time, and whatever, Olivier Parnis is giving Eddie Irvine in third position a very hard time indeed. Irvine's best place so far this season was the third position that he had in his first Grand Prix for Ferrari at Melbourne, the magnificent track there for the Australian Grand Prix, the first race of the year. He's had a couple of other podium places as well.
Well, Irvine there being shown the blue flag, but that really is not relevant in this situation. The blue flag is to be shown when a driver is being lapped, when a slower driver is being lapped, and that very definitely is not the case there. Having said that, I'm sure it's very easy for, well, blue flags being shown all the way around, but once again, these drivers are on the same lap, they're racing for the position, so the blue flags, I cannot believe, are appropriate.
And it's not appropriate, incidentally, to say that Eddie Irvine has had a couple of other podium places. He's had a couple of other points finishes, and that's a very different... Sent right together, he locks his wheel. Olivier Parnis locks his wheel as he tries to go through, and he's pushed Irvine off. There's a collision. Out goes the second Ferrari for much the same reason as the original one went out of Michael Schumacher's at almost the same place, just a few yards farther on, and Jacques Villeneuve is now the fastest man. Here's a replay. Eddie Irvine turns, and along comes the wing of Parnis's Ligier. Irvine's got nowhere to go.
Well, the galling thing is that Irvine could have carried on, but I think he stalled the engine on his Ferrari. He hasn't actually touched anything. And is he getting underway? He's coasting. This is exactly what happened to Irvine. In fact, in the warm-up session this morning, when a Lacey spun on him, he stopped. He stalled the car at this very point. And I do wonder, the Ferrari has this hand clutch, that in these situations, putting your foot on a foot clutch to disengage the engine and rev the engine is a very natural thing to do. Turning and trying to pull on the lever to dip the hand clutch is not so natural, and I really think that, is he going to be able to bump start the car? This is the question. Well, he's rolling down the hill. Has he managed to get the engine running? I really think that foot clutches are actually a better solution in these situations.
And here's an interesting point. If he had a push start, he will be disqualified. Well, he's got it going again. If, on the other hand, the marshals were adjudged to be removing him from a position of danger, in the words of the regulations, and he was on a hill and he was able to bump start the Ferrari, he should legally be able to keep going. We'll know the answer fairly soon, because they will black flag him if he's got to come in. But Eddie Irvine's got it going again, and meantime, Jean Alesi is now the quickest man on the track. He's got the gap to Damon Hill down to just under 25 seconds. That's Gustav Brunner, the Ferrari designer, in the middle. And here is the Ferrari of Eddie Irvine, the only one of the two that started left in the race. Damon Hill leads on lap 38 by 25 seconds from Jean Alesi. Is Irvine coming in? Indeed he is. Eddie Irvine coming in. Now let's see what happens. Stop the Ferrari. Hill leads. Alesi second. Parnis up to third as a result of that coming together at Lowe's corner. Tyres and wheels off. It's a new nose cone being fitted on the Ferrari. We know it takes about 13 seconds for Williams. Let's see how long it takes for Ferrari. Under goes the jack, and I don't know what the mechanics are up to there. It looks to me as though they're adjusting Irvine's safety belts.
He undid his seatbelts, I think, at the time of that incident to try and get himself out of his problem, and then he's having to come in essentially to have his seatbelts done back up. That's what's going on. But the mechanics probably thought that he was coming in for a new nose cone. They would have seen the incident and reasonably assumed that there was some damage to it. I'm not convinced there was, but we wonder now, will that Ferrari be overheating? Look at the smoke coming out of the back of it. Steam probably coming out of the back of it. That's where it happened. We can still see the marks. But in fact, the fact that Irvine can continue at all, or it hasn't punctured the left tyre, can be due to some thanks to some new regulations this year, in which the front wing end plates, and that's the vertical face at the very end of the front wings. This is amazing to spend so long, and he's stalled it now. Oh dear, Eddie, really. Well, the poor amount of distress going on in that man's mind. He had the race so much under control, doing a great job with the Ferrari, holding off Frentzen, holding off Panis. Panis went for the inside, and it's all gone downhill from there.
That is Olivier Panis, who's the sturdy, vigorous, aggressive move at Lowe's hairpin, about which I suggest there will be some discussion afterwards between Panis and Irvine. Moved him up to third on the grid, fastest on the track. The Ligier is really flying now with the Mugen Honda V10 engine, and Damon Hill on lap 39 in Monaco leads Jean Alesi by 29 seconds.
And here's some irony. It's going to happen all over again, or is it? Because Panis has come along and Irvine's pulled out of the pits just in front of him. Well, we were talking about the end plates on these front wings, and this year they have to be thicker. They have to be considerably thicker, so that if they should strike a rear tyre, and Irvine's taking no chances this time, letting Panis get merrily on his way, those thicker end plates with rounded edges are designed to stand much less chance of puncturing a tyre. And when we saw that incident, if we have to see it again, look at the edge of the front wing of that Ligier Panis. It actually rubs up alongside the front wheel of Irvine without puncturing it. So on this instance, they've served their purpose.
Lap 40, 78 lap race. There are 10 cars left in it at the present moment. Damon Hill leads Jean Alesi by nearly 29 seconds. Olivier Panis, that you are looking at now, the Frenchman in the Ligier Mugen, is the quickest man on the track, and he is lapping 2 seconds a lap faster than Damon Hill at the present moment, but he's 50 seconds behind the Williams. David Coulthard is in 4th position, 8 seconds behind the car that you're watching, Olivier Panis. 5th is Johnny Herbert, who is coincidentally 8 seconds behind Coulthard. 6th is Villeneuve, who is underneath the rear wing of Johnny Herbert's Williams. I hope we'll be able to see that. And Mika Salo is in 7th place, just a second behind Villeneuve. So there's a great scrap between Herbert, Villeneuve and Salo for 5th, 6th and 7th places, and for that matter Mika Hakkinen, who is in 8th place, because those 4 cars are virtually together. 9th is Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and in 10th position is Eddie Irvine, who now of course has been lapped not once but twice. Damon Hill coming through to complete his 40th lap, another 38 to go.
Well, Olivier Panis is absolutely flying. He's pretty much the fastest man on the track. He's closed the gap from being 29 seconds behind Alesi on lap 37 to being 21 seconds behind Alesi now. And indeed, Alesi is 28 seconds behind Damon Hill. Hill there continues to have this race totally under control. And his confidence has really achieved new levels this year. And in fact, before this race, I think he very much realised that this was a race that he may not win. He may have to let Schumacher win it, because there's no doubt Schumacher did look strong. And the fact was that even if Hill finished in 2nd place and picked up 6 points to Schumacher's 10 for winning it, had that happened and had that continued to happen, it would have taken Schumacher, I think, some 5 or 6 races to overhaul Hill. So Damon are thinking very much championship nowadays, and that's the important thing as well. Clearly he wants to win every race, and smoke out of the back of the Williams. This is going to be the first time that the Williams Hill's failed to finish this year.
Damon Hill out of the Monaco Grand Prix. He was destined not to win this race, and my goodness, the Englishman's heart will be plunging to his boots. Flames out of the back of the engine, and Damon walks away. Oh, look, you can see the anguish and the bitter irony of it all as he clenches his fist to his helmet. And John Lacey there moves into the lead of the Monaco Grand Prix. What an incredible race, because we thought, frankly, that Michael Schumacher was going to get the job done starting from pole position, only brilliantly to be passed by Damon Hill when the race began at the start. Michael Schumacher loses the Ferrari on the approach to the tunnel on the very first lap, nearly knocks off his left front wheel. Damon Hill, superbly in wet and dry conditions, holds the lead by nearly half a minute until lap 41, only to have happened what you have just seen. Somehow the Renault V10, I presume, has let go. I must be careful and not blame the engine until I know, but that replay shows it's suspiciously like an engine problem as that puff of smoke comes out from the back of the V10, and that is exactly where Damon Hill's rear suspension broke a couple of years ago, and he went shooting down the escape road and managed not to hit anything. And now a Benetton Renault leads for the first time in a Grand Prix and shows the sign of winning it since the race before the end of the 1995 Grand Prix season, when Michael Schumacher won. And it's Jean Lacey leading, and Parnis is up into second place, David Coulthard is up into third, Johnny Herbert is in fourth, Villeneuve is in fifth in the other Williams, and sixth is Mika Salo, and there are now only 9 cars left.
Well, I'm pretty sure that was indeed an engine problem, and surprising too, because Renault engines have been pretty reliable. They're obviously pushing the limits forward, but this circuit is not particularly hard on engines, certainly not in the wet, because much of the time is spent off the throttle for all of these short, twisty corners that we can see. You really can't stress the engine too much. And let's be absolutely clear too, unless anybody thinks, was Damon Hill pushing that Williams too hard? Was he pushing his motor too hard? Did he contribute towards that blow-up? The answer is a resounding no. There is nothing that Damon Hill did, I'm quite sure, that was relevant at all. It was mere pure bad luck when Damon was doing everything absolutely perfectly.
I think we're going to be lucky to have 6 cars finish this race, in which case everybody who finishes it will score at least 1 World Championship point. The flag marshal's putting cement dust down over the oil that was dropped from Damon's car, which seems to underline the fact that the engine did indeed let go. And Jean Lacey, on his 43rd lap now, has to do for the rest of this race what we thought Damon Hill had got to do. Just watch everything. He's got the same kind of engine, a Renault V10, as Damon Hill had. I was saying earlier on that at least one of the 2 teams that uses the engine is not altogether happy with it any longer, because they feel they are starting to lose the power race to Mercedes, to Ferrari, to Peugeot. And Jean Lacey rounds the swimming pool on his 43rd lap. And let me not also forget to mention the Mercedes V10 engine. Lacey leading Parnis by over half a minute, and Olivier Parnis, if he gets points for the Ligier team, will be beside himself with joy. He's had 2 second places in his career already for Ligier. They were by default when virtually everybody else in the race fell out. But to finish on the podium is a great achievement, and there is 29-year-old Olivier Parnis. He comes from Lyon. This is only his 39th Grand Prix. He started driving for Ligier in 1994, so this is his 3rd season with the team. But behind Parnis you see Coulthard. Now, this is the battle, you see. There is Eddie Irvine, who is a long, long way behind because he's in 9th place, 2 laps adrift. But there's the McLaren. Turns in to Casino Square, and on lap 43, as we ride with the McLaren, it's a Lacey, Parnis, Coulthard that you're looking at, and David Coulthard can see a chance to get on the second step of the podium, because that is the Ligier turning out of the picture. Now we're with David Coulthard, who is in third place, and he can see his quarry ahead of him. Michael Schumacher out. Damon Hill is out. The two top men, and Damon Hill is going to score no points from the Monaco Grand Prix, nor is Michael Schumacher. The positions at the top of the World Championship will be retained, but Jacques Villeneuve should move closer to Damon Hill if he finishes the race. He's in the points at the moment in fifth place. Race order as you watch the developing battle between Parnis in the Ligier, and behind him David Coulthard in the red and white McLaren is a Lacey, Parnis, Coulthard, Herbert, Villeneuve, Sarlo, all on the same lap.
Now this will be interesting. Just how cooperative would Eddie Irvine be? Now this time Irvine does need to move out of the way to let Parnis by, because he is being lapped by Parnis. On the other hand, and that's David Coulthard really piling on the pressure there, leaving black lines accelerating out of the corner leading onto the main straight. But Eddie Irvine won't need to do too much, just to hold up Olivier Parnis enough for David Coulthard to close what's currently a 7.5 second, or 3.4 second gap, I beg your pardon there, as we can see two up to Olivier Parnis, coming down towards the Mirabeau. Irvine letting him through. Yes, he's doing that, and really he had no choice, but well done, Eddie. Clearly Irvine having some problems there with the Ferrari. He's pretty much out of contention in the race.
I remember when Damon Hill failed to win the British Grand Prix in the Williams for the same sort of reason, and he walked back from, I think it was Stowe Corner. He stopped on the way at the BRDC suite, the British Racing Drivers Club, and had a pint of beer, but he was obviously bitterly disappointed at not winning his home Grand Prix. Well, next to that, the one he wanted to win most was Monaco. He has failed to do so. He's not going to get anywhere near closing the gap between himself and his great father Graham, who won here 5 times. But now is Eddie Irvine going to move over a bit quicker for David Coulthard than he did for Olivier Parnis, and that's a question and not a criticism. If he does, it will enable Coulthard effectively to close the gap as we ride with, and now watch, Jean Alesi on lap 46 out of 78, starting to look good for his first win for his new Benetton Renault team. Remember, his teammate Gerhard Berger out a long time ago. He had done 35 laps, just under half distance of the race, when he drew in, undid his safety belts and got out of the car with a gearbox problem. Now there's Villeneuve, Sarlo and Hakkinen and Frentzen. Villeneuve is in 5th position, nose to tail again, and they're chasing Johnny Herbert, who is 4th. So coming down to the Mirabeau, Herbert, there's Villeneuve, there's Sarlo, there's Hakkinen right up behind the Tyrrell, going well, the V10 Yamaha engine, and now we're with Jacques Villeneuve, the only Williams left in the race, down to the tunnel again on lap 46.
Yes, and I'm sure the Williams team, Damon Hill looking absolutely daggers there. Huge disappointment. He must wonder what he has to do to win this race here, and there's nothing more that he could have done certainly here today. Huge disappointment. Feel very sorry for Damon Hill. But I think the Williams team, as I started to say, are not going to be too impressed with the performance of Jacques Villeneuve. He's really been off the pace throughout the whole weekend. He's not used the increasing track time that he's had to close the gap between himself and Damon Hill. And a team like Williams should be having 2 drivers who can both run up the front. That was pretty much the case last year with David Coulthard and Damon Hill. And indeed, in this sort of situation, Villeneuve should be in a position so that as and when Hill's engine fails, it's Villeneuve who's following behind, or Villeneuve that's in
Hill. Boy, he's smiling. He's got a great sense of humour. I don't suppose we'll be able to talk to him, but Tony Jardine's been finding out what happened to him.
Yeah, information from Anne Bradshaw, the Williams team press officer. She said that Damon radioed in as he came past the pits just before the engine blew up, and he said that the red light was on the dashboard on the right-hand side. The Renault technician said there didn't appear to be any problem via the telemetry, but just a few seconds later, apparently the engine expired.
So you've just seen Johnny Herbert, thank you Tony, go into the tunnel, chased by Villeneuve, Salo, Häkkinen and Frentzen. That's Adrian Newey, the Williams designer, with Damon Hill on the right. And Williams have had so many misfortunes at Monaco. Nigel Mansell never won here, one of the very few races he didn't win. But let's come back to this one, because there's the action as we ride with Jacques Villeneuve, 5th position. The car ahead is Johnny Herbert Sauber. Is Herbert going to finish in the points for himself and the Swiss Sauber Ford team for the first time this year? Salo followed by Häkkinen. So Canadian, Finn, and then the German Heinz-Harald Frentzen. That's him in the Sauber, coming through to complete the lap. Villeneuve into Saint-Devote. Salo, Häkkinen. Now it's on the descent to the Mirabeau that Mika Salo or Häkkinen may make an effort to get past. If we say there are no passing places here, there are some where you can try, and this is one of them, but nobody is close enough to the man in front, although Mika Häkkinen rolls right up to the back of the Tyrrell Yamaha of Mika Salo, and he richly deserves another World Championship point. Mika Salo from Finland has finished in the points twice this year. He finished 5th in Brazil and 6th in Australia, but since then it's virtually been all downhill for the Tyrrell team. His teammate Ukyo Katayama has yet to score this year. Now here's Herbert, 4th place. Villeneuve, Salo, Häkkinen and Frentzen, who is in 8th position. You can see how close they are, with Villeneuve out of the swimming pool area.
So lap 48, we're approaching 2/3 distance, and let's just reflect on what could be going on in terms of pit stops. The bulk of the pit stops all took place around about lap 27, 28, 29. Now that was the kind of time when, if these drivers were going to be on a 2-stop strategy, we would have expected the first stop. We then would expect the second stop, if indeed that's what they were doing, to take place in about over the course of the next 4 laps. So we need to watch out for that possibility. But I think there's a greater possibility that in many of these cars, if not all of them, certainly some of them, started with enough fuel in the tank. They were going to try and get to the end of the race had it been wet throughout the whole race, but clearly with these conditions that would have been an impossibility. And the timing of that first pit stop would actually coincide with getting the cars onto slick tyres at the right time, getting a combination of that. Now, if they were virtually able to do the whole race on one tank of fuel, they would only have needed probably 40 or 50 litres to be topped up to get the whole race distance, even if the track dried out, and that would be consistent with a 6 or 7 second stop. Now, sadly, we didn't see the times of the actual stops in most cases because the stopwatch wasn't superimposed. But again, the lap times they're consistent, I think, with having enough fuel on the cars from the front runners to get to the end. But so there are 2 options basically. Will they be in the next probably 4 or 5 laps if they were going to do a straightforward 2-stopper, or will they just simply continue through to the very end? And I would tend to favour the latter option.
Well, here is race leader Jean Alesi. Is he going to redeem his slightly tarnished honour by winning in Monaco? To show you how much the lap times have come down, Olivier Panis has made the fastest lap of the race on lap 49 in 1 minute 26 seconds, and that is just about 4 or 5 seconds outside the all-time lap record. And Tony Jardine's got Damon with him.
Damon, I know you must be bitterly disappointed. We're all desperately sorry for you. Have you found out what happened yet?
I had a warning light for about a lap before what actually happened was the engine blew in the tunnel, and I came out of the tunnel with oil coming out of the back and the engine seized up, but I don't know quite what caused the engine to fail. But I had a warning light that came on about a lap before that actually happened, so I knew there was a problem anyway.
We said that this track was the supreme challenge, but you were equal to it and you were absolutely flying.
Well, I thought I had it. I thought I had a grip on the race, and we had enough fuel to go to the end of the race, so I didn't have to do another stop. So I thought I could hold Alesi at that gap, and the only thing remaining was to keep the concentration and and also to have reliability. But I mean, we didn't get that last bit, and we're all very, very disappointed. We just have to wait another year.
How slippery was it, Damon?
It was very, very, very slippery. The whole first half of the race was very tricky. I had 3 or 4 major moments where I thought I'd lost it, but I never got to the end. That's a shame.
What about when you got the news that Schumacher was out? That surely gave you a bit of a fillip.
No, not at all. I didn't really know where he'd gone. All I knew was when I looked in my mirror on the first lap, he wasn't there, and neither was anyone else. And I knew I had to keep pushing and make a big gap.
Well, he didn't get any points, so now looking forward to Spain.
Yes, we've got a lot of races to come. I could have done with a point throw from here.
Well, to be honest, we could have done with the champagne from you tonight.
Yeah, well, we'll still have some champagne, whatever.
Well done. Thanks for talking to us, Damon, and hard luck.
Thanks very much.
Well, everybody's heart goes out to Damon. Remarkably composed and genuinely cheerful. I suppose one has to be realistic and say, having won 4 times out of 5 races and been in the points in all 5 of them, sooner or later his luck was bound to change. It always does in motor racing. The car doesn't always go the distance, or you make a mistake. But what a pity it happened here, because as I've said before, this was the race he so much wanted to win. And Jean Alesi now has got the message. He's got the message that Olivier Panis in the Ligier is genuinely driving extremely quickly, and he's not benefiting just from the fact that there have been massive retirements. And Alesi has answered back with the fastest lap of the race, 1:25.4. He's now 30 seconds ahead of Panis. Coulthard, that you're looking at, is third, 6 seconds behind the Ligier, which you just see disappearing in the distance. Johnny Herbert is in 4th place. Villeneuve is 2 seconds behind him, 5th, but only just ahead of Sarlo, 6th, who's just ahead of Hakkinen, 7th, and he's 2 seconds ahead of Frentzen, 8th.
Interesting, on that Lowe's Portier section, we could just get a glimpse of the inside front wheel of David Coulthard's McLaren slowing almost to a standstill. Whatever, it's certainly a highly impressive performance from Panis, and whilst the Ligier is going a lot better than many thought once it was devoid of Tom Walkinshaw and Frank Durney and some other notable people, the Honda engine the Mugen Honda engine is one of the most powerful in Formula One, and that's been making the cars certainly quick in a straight line, and they're obviously not going badly around the corners either.
And that caption underlines the fact that Alesi is pressing on. His last lap 2 seconds faster than that of Panis. Indeed, Alesi's now put in a whole string of fastest laps, and he's starting to get closer towards the lap record here at Monaco. He's in a very commanding position, but then so was Damon Hill. Alesi is 30 seconds, nearly 32 seconds ahead of Panis. There is Panis. Now look for the red and white car of David Coulthard, and you'll see the gap between Panis, who is second, Coulthard, who is third, and they're sandwiching the lapped Ferrari of Eddie Irvine that you just see coming into the picture now, and that is David Coulthard in the background. The gap is actually 6.5 seconds. But the battle really that we ideally need to be looking at is the battle for 4th position, because it's Herbert, Villeneuve, Sarlo, Hakkinen, and then a bit further back Heinz Harald Frentzen are together on the track. any of those places could change. But John Alesi, who's only won one Grand Prix in his career, looks as though this could be the second one. He's driven in over 100 Grand Prix. Indeed, this is his 108th, and he's into the pit lane. Now, this is Alesi taking his second stop. Looks quite routine. The fuel filler is in, comes out clearly, and that was a lovely pit stop. No problem at all, as Alesi, with his high-intensity rear light still on, exits the pit lane, and he's going to be still in the lead as he comes back onto the track, because Olivier Panis has not yet appeared. So Alesi should be running through to the end of the race now. That's his second stop, the first time for a set of slick tyres. There goes Panis past me as Alesi crests the hill. So he's got the whole of the course between Saint-Devote, the right-hander, and Casino Square, between him and the Ligier, plus the time it will take Panis to come in and make a tyre stop, which I would imagine he's going to do.
Well, that's that question answered about whether or not certainly Alesi could run to the end, or was he going to make another stop. Now, again, I'd be very surprised if Panis doesn't need to come in. But something that I think is interesting here is that we know from what Damon Hill said, he gave us a clue there, he said that he could run to the very end, as I suspected might be possible. And I think it would be logical to assume that if he can do that, Jacques Villeneuve can do that too. Now, Villeneuve is just 1.9 seconds behind Herbert. Herbert is 12 seconds behind Coulthard. And if Coulthard and Herbert have to stop, and they make a second stop, that's going to put Villeneuve up ahead of both of them. And although probably if Panis stops too, that could well mean that Villeneuve will be up to second place by the end of this race. Now, that is assuming that Panis, Coulthard and Herbert all need to make that extra stop. I think there's a likelihood of it being Panis, possibility of being Herbert, but I get a sneaky suspicion that Coulthard may be able to go to the end again without stopping in the same way that Villeneuve can. So if that was the situation, we'd be looking at Alesi, Coulthard, Villeneuve as a top three.
But whatever, it looks as though the good times are rolling for Benetton again. Last year, Michael Schumacher won an incredible 9 times to equal Nigel Mansell's record. Johnny Herbert won twice to make it 11 victories from 17 races last year, with Damon Hill and Alesi making up the rest of the victories. And Benetton have had a pretty thin time this season. The best positions they've had are second and third for Alesi in Brazil and Berger in the San Marino Grand Prix. But if Alesi wins this one for Renault, it will be back to the good times for Benetton as we join Heinz-Harald Frentzen for his third stop as he exits the pit lane. The first stop, you will recall, was to change the nose cone. The second was to change the tyres. The third was to change the tyres. Here is Jean Alesi, lap 56 out of 78, leading Panis, who we presume has got to come in again, by 11 seconds. Coulthard is 6.8 seconds behind Panis in third place. Johnny Herbert is just about 13 seconds behind Coulthard in fourth position. And then there is the battle between Villeneuve, Salo and Hakkinen. And we've seen a few spots of rain coming down. I've been worried about this because the skies have been getting darker. You can see that the track is completely dry here. But let's hope that it doesn't come down as a deluge, which is what it did this morning. It absolutely belted down. Umbrellas out. Lap 57, some way to go. There could be more drama still at Monaco.
Let's look at this gap, 13.6 seconds from Alesi to Panis. Now, again, as we've said before, these kind of conditions, the rain coming down on slick tyres, should play into Alesi's hands, and we'd expect to see that gap increase rather than decrease. But, of course, it adds a new hazard, a big hazard too. Monaco is difficult enough at the best of times. It's difficult enough in the dry, the wet, but the wet on slick tyres is the hardest situation of all. And that situation existed towards the end of the race, I think, way back in 1982, when car after car led over the last few laps before spinning off into retirement, and eventually it was Riccardo Patrese who won, in, as I recollect, a Brabham at the time. So spits of rain going on, but I'm afraid for Frentzen and the Sauber team, not an impressive effort here. I don't think Sauber have managed the pit stop routines particularly well. Now we can see why Frentzen was going so well in the early stages, and that was clearly because his car had less fuel on. It had maybe a third of a tank. He's had to come in for a second top up, as indeed has Alesi. But whilst Alesi had a clear track ahead of him and to use, and that was understandable, bearing in mind he was third on the grid, Frentzen from ninth on the grid was unlikely to be able to do that, and that's exactly what happened. He did a great start for sure, but he got held up by Eddie Irvine. He couldn't use the increased performance of that Sauber being light at the time. It provoked frustration. He made the mistake of whacking the back of Irvine, losing the front nose and losing probably 30 seconds in total in the process, 40 seconds maybe. Now he's had to make his second stop. You know, this is the kind of performance that means that it's all unfolding rather poorly for the Sauber team at a time when they really needed to get it right. The car's gone relatively well. The Ford V10 engine is getting better all the time, and Frentzen is undoubtedly a quick driver. Just a case of the ingredients not all coming together at the same time.
Out of the tunnel, down to the chicane. Jean Alesi made his name originally, as far as the international single-seater racing world was concerned, in Formula 3000. And look at this, Villeneuve, Sarlo and Häkkinen, 5th, 6th and 7th into Lowe's, and ahead of them is Johnny Herbert. At last we've picked up this battle I've been talking about. Jacques Villeneuve looking good at the moment for 2 World Championship points to close the gap a little between himself and his team leader Damon Hill, who is leading the World Championship still, of course, especially after the disappearance of Michael Schumacher, his main threat here, we thought. So Herbert, Villeneuve, Sarlo, and behind Sarlo is Häkkinen. So it's Sauber, Williams, Tyrrell, McLaren, and then Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the second of the 2 Saubers. And in the top 6, as far as makes are concerned, it's Alesi, Benetton, Parnis, Ligier, Coulthard, McLaren. Then the ones that you see: Herbert, Sauber, Villeneuve, Williams, Sarlo in the blue helmet, who's just gone past in the Tyrrell, and Mika Häkkinen in the red and white McLaren is just out of the points in 7th position. This is Villeneuve.
And with 20 laps to go, let's just clarify once again the pit stop situation for the top 6. Alesi, I am sure, will not stop again, nor, I believe, will Villeneuve back in 5th place. The question mark is, will Panis, will Coulthard and Herbert, that's the 2nd, 3rd, 4th place, and Sarlo in 6th, any of those may have to come into the pits once again.
We've seen this situation in this race before. A man ahead, and if he plays his cards right, places his car properly, brakes at the right points, accelerates away at the right points, and preserves his cool, he's going to be very, very difficult indeed to get past. Jacques Villeneuve learning the track craft of the Monaco circuit. He said himself after the Thursday practicing he found it very difficult indeed. The other circuits that he'd been to first, of course, were the Australian Grand Prix at Melbourne, which was new to everybody. Brazil was new to him. Argentina was new to him. The Nürburgring was new to him. He had been to Imola before, but all of those, the ones that he hadn't been to, are much easier to learn and master than the unique Monaco circuit, and he just hadn't had enough time. But as Jonathan was saying earlier on, David Coulthard was in exactly the same position for Williams last year, and he qualified extremely well and raced extremely well, right up in the podium positions.
And he's racing extremely well this year too. David Coulthard really has developed into the team leader at the moment of the McLaren team. McLaren are thoroughly professional, of that there's no doubt, and they've been very supportive of Mika Häkkinen, and there's also little doubt that Mika Häkkinen has had 1 or 2 little problems along the way in the last few Grand Prix. The fact still remains that Coulthard has out-qualified Häkkinen for the last 3 Grand Prix now, and I think part of that comes from a few things are involved in that. One, the fact that, and into the pits comes, well, difficult to see, is it a Tyrrell? No, it's Alesi once again. What is going on? Alesi has a problem.
Are we going to see yet another leader here? Because Alesi was only 18 seconds ahead of Parnis, and the time is slipping by. There's no work being done on the car. Yes, there is now. I'm looking at the pit lane. Ligier goes through. behind him, Coulthard. We have another new leader in Monaco. Jean Alesi in the Benetton has got a major problem there, and Olivier Parnis leads. David Coulthard is up into second place. Is Alesi going to get through before Johnny Herbert and Villeneuve and Salo and Hakkinen, who are all together? Well, there is Alesi leaving the pit lane. There is Herbert. I think he's going to get through in front of him. What an incredible turn up for the book. There's Alesi, and Herbert has gone through. Villeneuve has gone through. Hakkinen has gone through, and so has Salo. Jean Alesi came in first, and he leaves seventh out of the point. Incredible.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. That was not, I believe, in any way a routine pit stop. Alesi has a problem with that Benetton. I don't think the pits didn't know he was coming in. That's why there was the great hesitation before anybody got on. That's team leader Flavio Briatore. And it's my guess we may well see Alesi coming back in once again, because I'd be surprised if the team managed to sort out whatever problem was severe enough to bring Alesi in that time. They did what they do as a knee-jerk reaction quite correctly, and that's put on a new set of tyres and send him out again and perhaps put a splash more fuel in. But I really cannot believe that was a scheduled stop, and indeed, well, we know it wasn't. There's no doubt about it. Could it be a puncture? Alesi may have felt, now this is a clue to us, we're looking at the tyre, checking the tyre pressures, and it would be nice if we could even read the pressure on it. It should be 18, well, I think that was a rear tyre. 18 is a little bit low. If it was a front tyre, it's spot on. The front tyre pressure is 18, or it should be, and the rear is 21.
Well, now, I'm starting to ask myself whether Parnis has got a problem, because Eddie Irvine, who is actually 2 laps behind the Ligier, is much closer to it on the track. I said this was going to be a race of attrition. I said I would be not too surprised if only half a dozen cars went the distance, all of whom would get points. But Parnis is certainly going a lot slower than Eddie Irvine. You can see him. You can see the Ferrari closing up on the Ligier, and you can see, and Alesi is in the pit still and is retiring from the Monaco Grand Prix. Schumacher out. Damon Hill in the lead, out. Jean Alesi, his successor, is out. Ferrari out, Williams out, Benetton out, 3 of the top makes, and now, totally against expectations, it would have been a brave man who forecast this on lap 62 out of 78. Frenchman Olivier Parnis from Lyon leads the Monaco Grand Prix in his Ligier Mugen Honda, and it's a mighty long time since Ligier won a Grand Prix, as you look at Jean Alesi impassively removing his earplugs. Indeed, it was Canada in 1981 that a Ligier last won a Grand Prix, and we've just seen in the Ligier pits the man who won it, Jacques Lafitte. And now we're with David Coulthard, I think, and he's got ahead of Johnny Herbert. This race is really coming alive, and we're on lap 63. There is the stricken Benetton, and the heartily dismayed Jean Alesi shrugging his shoulders as we watch Parnis, who's edged out the gap between himself and 2 laps behind him, Eddie Irvine, and in second place David Coulthard in the red and white McLaren. That's the gap between the Ligier and the McLaren. We might even see a McLaren winning, and it's the last time they did that was 1993, Ayrton Senna in Adelaide, the Australian Grand Prix. It's wide open.
Well, as things stand now, I'd put my money on David Coulthard. I'm sure the combination of Coulthard and McLaren will be able to get ahead of Parnis however well he's doing. And certainly at the very worst, it'll be Coulthard right all over the back of Parnis in the closing stages. But people over the years have wondered why Jean Alesi has only won 1 race. Indeed, they've used that fact, and the race was Canada last year, as evidence the fact that he's not as good as he's cracked up to be. But on the other hand, when you see what's happened now, Alesi out of that race from some mechanical problem with his Benetton, he, like Damon Hill, did everything absolutely right. And in this business, you need an element of luck. And that element of luck really has not been with Jean Alesi a great deal. Certainly not at Ferrari. He had quite a few breakdowns, and certainly wasn't here today, because Alesi deserved that. If Hill wasn't going to win, and he deserved to win it most, Alesi was the second most deserving winner.
Lap 64. Now the burning question is Eddie Irvine going to move over and let David Coulthard through? If he doesn't, the gap will increase between himself and Olivier Parnis, leading a Grand Prix for the first time that I can remember. Anyway, as I said, he's finished second before, twice, but he's never won a Grand Prix. If he won here in Monaco, my goodness, the bells would be ringing all over France, I should should think. Parnis leads, lap 64, 78 lap race. Flavio Briatore consoles Jean Alesi. The Benetton race is over. Both have retired, and the order now on lap 64 is Parnis, Coulthard, 2.5 seconds, the gap. Irvine is still sandwiched between them in the Ferrari. Irvine, in third position is Johnny Herbert. He might not only be getting points for Sauber for the first time, but finishing on the podium for Sauber. Fourth is Villeneuve in the Williams. Fifth is Hakkinen, so both the McLarens are in the top 6 scoring points, and Parnis is now up behind Badoer. He's being held up, and you can see Irvine, and this is Coulthard's opportunity. The gap was 2.5 seconds. It is certainly going to be a lot less than this, I think, at the end of this lap. Parnis has got past, Irvine has got past. Now David Coulthard needs to get, and he's done it. He's got past Badoer on the inside at Saint-Devote, and the gap is down to 1.5 seconds. Wow.
And it was important for Coulthard to get by before this part. That winding section up the hill, then through this left-hander at Massenet, 90 miles an hour, round over the brow, down the hill up to 5th gear. See them jink right. That's missing that steep bit of the bump section there. Ligier team looking on. This is a marvellous result for Ligier. Even if Parnis breaks down now, it will have been one of their most morale-boosting performances for a very long time. But David Coulthard is closing up. He's taken 1 second off that lead of Parnis. It's now just 1.5 seconds. We can see it getting there. I'm quite sure that Eddie Irvine is not going to prove any kind of obstruction for Coulthard as he closes up. Well, thunderous looking face from Flavio Briatore. He's mystified. That says it all. And Benetton's reliability last year was absolutely legendary, but hasn't been quite the same so far. Certainly not here. 2 Benettons out in the same race is not good for them.
Lap 65. David Coulthard has won 1 Grand Prix in his short career. He won the Portuguese Grand Prix for Williams last year. This is only his 31st Grand Prix, and I believe, like Jonathan, that he's in good shape to make his second victory here at Monaco. But he's got to get past Irvine. There's no sign of him closing the gap. It was 1.5 seconds. They've both completed the lap and started a new one, and the gap is actually increased. Olivier Parnis's last lap was 1.4 seconds faster than that of David Coulthard, and he's now 2.9 seconds ahead. We're on the Ligier now, looking across at the barriers as he drops down to the right-hander at the Mirabeau. There is the Ferrari, 2 laps down. There is the McLaren, 3 seconds behind the Ligier. Into the tunnel again, lap 66.
And it's amazing how the McLaren team's mood must have changed over the last 2.5 hours, because after the wet practice session that took place at 1 o'clock, they were not a happy bunch at all. McLaren, unlike Williams, Ferrari and Benetton, have only got 1 spare car here, whereas Williams, Ferrari and Benetton have got 2, 1 for each driver. And the reason for that is that McLaren here are running a new evolved version of the MP411. It has a shorter wheelbase. The spacer between the gearbox and the engine is shorter, so the rear wheels are basically closer to the driver. As a result, it has more weight over the front wheels, so it turns into the corners better, and that's a real asset here at Monaco. Ron Dennis there was looking pretty unhappy at the prospect of a wrecked McLaren after Mika Hakkinen had thrown his race car into the wall in that wet practice at 1 o'clock. That meant that the only spare car that was destined for Coulthard was taken over by Hakkinen, so by that stage McLaren were down to just their 2 race cars. But here they are with just some 12 laps to go to the end of the Monaco Grand Prix, with Coulthard challenging, or virtually challenging, for the lead, and Mika Hakkinen up to 5th place to make it 2 McLaren Mercedes in the top 6.
And here is yet another ingenious twist to this incredible plot. There are only just over 12 minutes left of this race. There is no way it is going to be a 78-lap race because of the wet conditions. We're on lap 67 at the present moment, and there are 11 minutes and 49 seconds left, counting down to the finish of an amazing Monaco Grand Prix, with Olivier Parnis leading David Coulthard by an increasing margin. Coulthard is now 3.5 seconds behind, as there you see the Badeur holding everybody else off and Villeneuve out.
There's been a tangle there, I'm sure. Villeneuve's left front wheel. Let's look at it. Villeneuve comes up the inside, bangs into the 40 car of Luco Badeur. Badeur up in the air. Well. What Badeur was doing coming up on the inside. Let's have another look. Well, Villeneuve's on the... No, what's happened is Badeur has let through Herbert. He hasn't realised that Villeneuve's going to come through too. It's a classic kind of confusion, and the left front suspension of Villeneuve's car is damaged to put him out of the race. And what a miserable end to a torrid first Monaco Grand Prix for Jacques Villeneuve.
Dreadful race for Ferrari, although Eddie Irvine is still running. He's 8th and 2 laps down. Schumacher out, Damon Hill out in the lead. Jacques Villeneuve out of his first Monaco Grand Prix when he was looking good for 3 points for 4th position. Dreadful race for Benetton. Jean Alesi out. That is Villeneuve's car being craned away from Lowe's hairpin, and you see the Ligier of Parnis followed by the McLaren of Coulthard, still with there's Irvine Ferrari 2 laps behind, but sandwiched between the two of them, and David Coulthard is still over 3 seconds behind, and Badeur is out of the race.
And you can see the damaged suspension, the car listing to the right hand side. Well, Badeur may well should find himself up before the stewards for that one, because he was some 6 laps behind Villeneuve, and with that kind of deficit he should have been keeping out of everybody's way, and even if one person had come through, he should have made very sure that he checked his mirrors before resuming the racing line, because queues, trains, crocodiles of traffic are notorious here at Monaco, and as a result of his negligence on that, Jacques Villeneuve is now out of this race.
Lap 68, Coulthard getting closer and closer to Eddie Irvine, who is not a threat to him in terms of race positions, but he's a threat to him in terms of getting at Olivier Parnis. Now they've completed another lap. They're on their 69th lap out of 78, and the gap is down to 2.2 seconds. Irvine surely will move over and let the attacking David Coulthard through. He must know that there's a big gap in terms of distance between them, and that it's a battle for victory between the Ligier and the McLaren. Race order: Parnis, Coulthard, Herbert, Sarlo, Hakkinen, Frentzen, and there are only 7 cars left in the race.
Well, I think Eddie Irvine would move out of the way, and indeed might be about to just as soon as Coulthard gets close enough to warrant it, but that hasn't been the case for a while, and we may wonder, why does David Coulthard in the McLaren is having a problem when he qualified in 5th, catching up with the Ligier of Parnis ahead when Parnis qualified in 14th position? And the answer may be in the wet weather setups, because I know that McLaren were changing springs, they were changing roll bars, dampers, they were softening the car up to make it have more grip in the wet. They were also, as we know, putting on a bit more downforce on the rear. They were looking at a method of doing that, and all of that will have benefited the car in the wet, but it could just be that now those measures are actually perhaps losing Coulthard maybe a second a lap. His car will be relatively soft, it'll be rolling around a lot. Don't expect to see it, because it'll only be a thing you see from the cockpit, and that's just what we wanted to see happening there in terms of clearing the road anyway for David Coulthard. Is it going to be fuel? Is it going to be a top-up of fuel? Yes, it is indeed. Another set of slick tyres going on to Eddie Irvine's car. Well, he's out of it anyway, so it's not going to make a big difference, but I think that must surely be the only last stop. I cannot believe that Coulthard, Herbert and Parnis would still be going around if they had to come in for another stop for them. But this is a race of unknowns, and it could still yet happen.
Lap 70, the race is well and truly on. Nothing between the Ligier and the McLaren on the track. It's either going to be a first victory for Ligier since 1981 or a first victory for McLaren since 1993. Either way, it's going to be wonderful for Formula One. The gap was 2.4 seconds. This is lap 70, and David Coulthard has got 8 laps to catch Olivier Parnis. But if that Ligier doesn't turn into the widest Formula One motor car you have ever seen on any circuit anywhere, I will be absolutely amazed. As I've said before, just an inch or two one way or the other can make it impossible for the driver behind you to get past. You need cooperation from the man in front to get past him, and Olivier Parnis certainly isn't going to be helping David Coulthard. Here he is, and it's starting to rain, Drama piling on drama. You can see it on the camera lens as Parnis comes through to complete his 70th lap. Now, it was 2.4 seconds. And as David Coulthard follows the Ligier round Saint-Devote and up towards the Massenet, the gap has gone up again slightly to just over 3 seconds. Oh my goodness, this tension is absolutely incredible. Lap 71, and I told you it wasn't going to be a 78 lap race. There are only just over 6 minutes of this race left. To be honest, I don't think that Coulthard can do it now, but we've got 6 minutes to find out.
No, I think you're right. Now, normally motor racing, driving a car right to its very limit is very much a skill from the head, not from the heart. But believe me, in a situation like this, when Parnis is driving superbly, this really is hugely impressive from the Frenchman. He's had a difficult time with some mediocre machinery for a long time, but this time it's all come right. Luck's played into his hand on this particular occasion, but he's making the very best use of it, whilst behind Coulthard knows that this is the best chance he's had for winning, and looks like Coulthard's getting ready for a pit stop, we hear. Could this be a last top-up, or is it just being precautionary in case the rain comes down harder? Because believe me, and
that's Irvine and Sarlo and Häkkinen. Oh my goodness! So there's only now here it is. Let's see what's happening. This is where Schumacher left it, and Irvine spins into sight in the Ferrari. Now let's see what happens. We look with the replay. This is him losing it as he exits Lowe's hairpin. So both Ferraris are out, and I think we're only going to have about 4 cars finish the Monaco Grand Prix. And now we have got 5 minutes left, that's all.
And that was surely a consequence of the rain coming down, Irvine being caught out by the slippery conditions. Häkkinen was very much a man on a mission there. What was he going to do? Let's have another look. There's Häkkinen. He's following through Sarlo in the Tyrrell, going out of our frame. And Sarlo bangs up to the back of Irvine. Is Häkkinen. Häkkinen then goes into the back of that. Does Häkkinen get out and wonder why with the marshals? Where were the yellow flags? Were the marshals busy looking at Irvine, not waving the yellows? Well, Häkkinen is... That's David Coulthard, of course, that we're with now, and David Coulthard following now with just minutes to go. Olivier Parnis, what an amazing race the Monaco Grand Prix once again is developing into.
4 minutes, and look, they're almost together. Never mind which lap they're on, it's time that matters now. David Coulthard has got nothing to lose by going for it, and Olivier Parnis has got nothing to lose by flinging the Ligier round the track at the maximum possible speed. Lap 72, that's irrelevant. 3 minutes and 50 seconds to go. That is highly relevant. But as I said, when David Coulthard closes on the Ligier and gets up behind its rear wing, and you see the rain on the camera lens again as he goes round the right-hander at the Rascasse, he will know that he's got to take a most tremendous chance to try to get past the Ligier. Flavio Briatore talking to the Ligier people. He owns the team, Flavio Briatore, the boss of Benetton. He didn't expect to see a Ligier victory here. He may not be seeing one, because now there are 3 minutes and 20 seconds left. The checkered flag will be getting ready, and there's only going to be a couple of laps after this, if that. Parnis.
And there are the wave yellow flags. Look at them. That's where that incident with Irvine, Sarlo and Häkkinen took place. The wreckage of Häkkinen's car is not bad, but the front nose once again gone, littered with debris. There's the 40 of Badoa, and Coulthard will be really giving it absolutely everything now. He's got, well, to say he's got nothing to lose is not quite true, of course, because he could still lose second place. He's 25 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert, but it's looking like a great result for Britain too, with Coulthard in second place, Herbert third. We're sure to get that, and Frentzen, having benefited from the Irvine, or certainly from the Sarlo Häkkinen contretemps when they ran up the back of Eddie Irvine. Frentzen now up to fourth place.
2 minutes 28, 27, 26, 25, 24, and so on into another lap. It's going to be this one. I think they're going to be able to do 2 laps probably. And the impassive Ligier staff, who will be anything but impassive inside their pit area there, give Olivier Parnis a signal, and the Frenchman has really got to keep cool now. Olivier Parnis is driving in his 38th Grand Prix. David Coulthard is driving in his 31st Grand Prix. two comparative newcomers. And now there is 1 minute and 49 seconds to go, ticking down. They will certainly complete this lap. I don't think the checkered flag will go out this lap, but it certainly will the next one.
No, I think they'll go past it once more, but what an amazing demonstration here over the last 2 hours of what an extraordinary, unpredictable sport Grand Prix racing is. A race that started off with Schumacher being the firm favourite. That's what most people felt. He was on pole position, he had the upper hand throughout qualifying. He blew it on lap 1 when he's got the back end of the car out and spun, hit the wall and put himself into retirement. Damon Hill then took over and looked, quite frankly, totally dominating, with no one going to threaten him. The only thing that threatened him was no error from Hill, but a problem with his Renault engine, and Hill was out by mid-distance. And then Lacey took over, Lacey's lead looking as solid as that of Hill, until on this occasion Lacey had a problem and put him out. And finally, Olivier Panis is surely going to win this race. He's far enough ahead now as he comes up to start what will be his last race. We're not going to make the full 78 lap distance, and no one would have put any significant odds on Olivier Panis and Ligier winning at Monte Carlo.
And he's on his last lap now. It's going to be an incredible, totally unexpected, not since 1981, victory for Ligier, because I cannot see David Coulthard and the McLaren Mercedes catching the Ligier Mugen Honda in what remains of this lap, unless Olivier Panis makes a mistake. And he's got the rhythm. He will be keeping a very close eye on everything. And you look back, and it looks to me as though David Coulthard, yes, he's now 3.5 seconds behind the Ligier, because Olivier Panis has pulled another 1.2 seconds out of the bag on the previous lap. The checkered flag is being readied, I can tell you that for sure. And Olivier Panis exits the tunnel, goes into the chicane for the 75th and last time in what is turning out to be a 2-hour race. Now into the Tabac, that famous left-hander. A bit changed from the old days, but it's still the Tabac. Now into the comparatively new swimming pool area. Onto the Rascasse, the second slowest corner on the course. And Olivier Panis for Ligier Mugen Honda, a wonderful fillip for the French team and their Japanese engine supplier, exits the Rascasse to win the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix. An incredible result. Oh, look at that for joy. And joy for McLaren. David Coulthard finishes second, and there's going to be joy for Sauber too, because Johnny Herbert is going to finish third, provided he comes home in the next few seconds. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is going to finish fourth, his teammate. So, a Sauber driver on the podium. There is Johnny Herbert, the British driver who now lives in Monaco, just a few hundred yards away from the corner he's rounding. And he won the British Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix last year. Finishes third for Sauber. Frentzen will finish fourth in about half a minute's time. Fifth will be Mika Salo. Points again for the Tyrrell Yamaha team. And that will be it with Mika Hakkinen. Oh, there's Coulthard. And somewhere on the way, Olivier Panis has picked up a tricolour. I hope he didn't stop, because I remember Damon Hill, when he won, picked up a Union Jack at a previous race, and only the fact that he had not broken the rule which says you must not stop on your way to the Parc Fermé prevented him from being excluded. That was André de Constanza, who is the designer of the reformed, or rather slightly reconstituted Ligier team, who have certainly proved that you can lose top people and still win races. We didn't expect this. It's great for Formula One. McLaren back in the pecking order. Ligier there for the first time for a very, very long time. Sauber scoring points for the first time this year. Tyrrell, who've had some dreadful luck, getting some good luck here at Monaco. And just 5 cars finishing out of the 21 that started. Well, 2 hours, 2 hours of highly concentrated emotion and excitement, with not at all what we expected to happen happening. We didn't expect Michael Schumacher to retire on the first lap. We didn't expect Damon Hill to dominate the race and then have, of all things, a Renault engine let him down. We didn't expect Jean Alesi to retire, but indeed he did. We didn't really expect Gerhard Berger in the other Benetton to retire, but indeed he did. We didn't expect Villeneuve to tangle and go out in the closing stages, meaning neither of the Williams finished. So no Ferraris finish, no Williams finish, no Benettons finish, but a Ligier finishes first.
And Olivier Panis will barely be able to believe this. Starting the race from 14th on the grid, okay, he was fastest in that warm-up. Maybe Ligier found some substantial tweak that improved the performance of that car, no end. But at the end of the day, he clearly benefited from the misfortune of others, which is not to mean that he drove any less well himself, because the Ligier is not a match for a Williams, it's not a match for a Benetton or a Ferrari, we know that. But today the combination has been everything you need to win a Grand Prix. Fast enough, but particularly reliable, and most importantly at Monaco with no mistakes. And I think when we see Panis up on that rostrum with his having taken his helmet off, he's going to be somewhat bewildered, but it's going to be the most joyous moment for the Ligier team. They've had a difficult time. The team has been moved around. Of course, Tom Walkinshaw pulled out of the team to go and join the Arrows establishment in England, and a lot felt that Ligier would really go in a fairly rapid downward spiral, but this is proof that certainly here that's not the case.
His second points finish this year, but never mind the first one. That was 6th position for Brazil. This transcends everything that he's done in his Grand Prix career before. Man who made his way to Formula One by winning the Formula 3000 European Championship, as he did in 1991. In 1993. And look at him. He's a lovely fella, actually. People say, who is Olivier Panis? He was one of the few drivers who didn't speak good English until fairly recently, but he's mastered it now and has the most. And his Serene Highness Prince Rainier gives the superb trophy for victory at Monaco to France's Olivier Panis, with Scotland's David Coulthard from Twynham taking the cup for second position. And where is Johnny Herbert? Because it is going to be France, Scotland, England as far as the first three drivers are concerned, and Ligier, McLaren and Sauber. We had Au Canada for Jacques Villeneuve winning the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. And there the proud stirring strains of the Marseillaise ring out, not only for Frenchman Olivier Panis winning the race, but for his French Ligier team being the top constructor. With a smiling and very happy, and deservedly so, Johnny Herbert in third position. And as I said, a great race for Sauber, whose day came here today at Monaco with third and fourth places. Heinz-Harald Frentzen for Germany, and for Switzerland in the form of Sauber taking that fourth position. Mika Salo for Finland, and for Britain and for Japan. For Britain, for Tyrrell, for Japan, for Yamaha, finishing in fifth position. Mika Häkkinen is actually classified as sixth, notwithstanding the fact that he failed to go the full race distance. So that means to say that both the McLaren Mercedes cars and drivers got points here at Monaco. And Eddie Irvine is actually classified for Ferrari as finishing in seventh place, notwithstanding the fact that he was 6 laps down. Jonathan, a great race.
absolutely fantastic. And there we are looking back at Olivier Panis in the Ligier Honda. You know, many people think that Monaco is not really a suitable place for a Grand Prix, that it's an anachronism and that it's only on the calendar through tradition. But surely the evidence over the years has shown that the fascination of Grand Prix results of the races at Monaco really does mean that not only does the venue deserve its place on the calendar, but maybe there should be more tracks like this, more tracks where driver ability really comes to the fore, tracks where drivers are punished, shall we say, in terms of damage if they make any slight mistake. And we see so many incidents, many of which are totally minor here at Monaco. The margins are very, very tiny. It's hard on the mechanics of the car as well, with some 3,000 gear changes over the full length of the race. And the result here, as we've seen, cannot surely have been better. We'd love to have seen Damon Hill win, of course, but isn't it marvellous to see some new faces on the rostrum, some new joys, some new encouragement that goes down through the lesser teams who do really have to rely upon mistakes, as from Michael Schumacher on the first lap when he just went into that Portier corner a bit too fast, the back came round and then he understeered off into the barrier. A mistake from Schumacher. And the rain is really coming down now with immaculate timing. The rain coming down, and certainly looking at the weather now, they would have had to come in for wet tyres if they were going to continue. And then behind that, again, the importance of reliability stressed with the failure of Williams with their car, with Damon Hill, with the Renault engine, and then of course with Jean Alesi in the Benetton. Once again, I say that Williams really do need to have two drivers who are going to be up there. Last year, I think David Coulthard would have been able to take over the mantle from Hill after Hill's Williams had failed, but it wasn't so here. Having said that, Villeneuve was cruelly taken out by a rash manoeuvre from Luca Badoer, who just did not see the Williams following the Sauber of Johnny Herbert coming through. But behind that, McLaren have transformed what looked to be a desperate situation this morning after they lost the one car after Mika Hakkinen threw it in the wall, into points for David Coulthard and points for Mika Hakkinen in 6th place. Hakkinen having a frustrating weekend. He's not going to be particularly pleased with that, but David Coulthard's got every reason to be absolutely thrilled with his 2nd place, and I'm sure we shall hear in due course why he could not catch Panis. But I'd put my suspicions on the fact that McLaren very much put their car into a wet weather format, a wet weather configuration, and Ligier did not compromise the dry settings as much, and that's why Ligier fairly flew in the latter stages. And there's no doubt Panis straightforwardly had the legs, had the measure of David Coulthard, and it's a very well-deserved win for Ligier.
And after a stirring Monaco Grand Prix with, as you can see, the rain fairly lashing down now, none of the first 4 in the championship finished the race, so their positions are unchanged. Damon Hill is still 21 points ahead of Villeneuve, who is still 6 points ahead of Schumacher. And Schumacher, who is 3rd, is 5 points ahead of Alesi. Panis moves up to equal 5th, and Williams are still way ahead of Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. So from round 6 at Monaco today, in 2 weeks' time for round 7, we go to Barcelona in Spain for the Spanish Grand Prix. Every Grand Prix this year has been a cracker one way or the other. I have little doubt that Spain will maintain the tradition.